Hey there, tonight we're drifting down the mighty Mississippi River aboard a steamboat, an experience far removed from the Hollywood glitz, where the real magic lies in the gentle hum of engines and the soft glow of oil lamps dancing on the water. If these stories help you unwind, I'd love a quick like or subscribe, but only if they're genuinely working for you. I'm curious where in the world you're listening from, so drop your location and local time in the comments. It's amazing seeing our little community span the globe through these historical tales. Now make yourself cozy, maybe adjust your room temperature or get that cup of tea, and let's explore tonight's tale together. So, you're stepping onto a Mississippi River steamboat in the 19th century, and it's like walking into a floating world of clashing realities. On one hand, you've got the glamour, the polished wood, the grand staircases, and the sense that you're part of something both modern and timeless. But just beneath the surface, there's a whole lot of clanking, whirring, and hissing going on. That's the steam engine, the beating heart of this mechanical beast, a brainchild of Robert Fulton. His development of the steam engine around 1807 was revolutionary, turning rivers into the highways of the era. Kind of like if Elon Musk showed up in the 1800s with a Tesla Model S and said, "Hey, let's redefine travel." Now, these steamboats weren't just marvels of engineering. They were economic game changers. Imagine a world where you could transport both people and goods a fraction of the time it used to take on those slow-moving flatboats. We're talking about the difference between weeks and days here. By 1820, there were more than 60 steamboats chugging up and down the Mississippi, and by the 1850s, that number had exploded to around 200. And what did that mean? Well, for starters, it slashed the cost and time of shipping goods, which was a big win for commerce and trade. For instance, a journey from New Orleans to Louisville used to take about 4 months. Steamboats cut it down to 25 days. The economic efficiencies were a major boost for the U.S. economy, fueling the growth of cities along the riverbanks. But hold onto your top hat, because not everything about this scene is as romantic as a dreamy Mark Twain novel might have you believe. Sure, there's the image of leisurely sipping mint juleps on the deck, but let's not forget the very real risk of mechanical failure. It was common enough to give pause to even the most daring adventurers. Boilers would sometimes overheat and explode, which, as I'm sure you can imagine, was not the kind of hot ticket anyone wanted. Between 1811 and 1851, more than 230 steamboats met a watery grave due to explosions, collisions, or just plain old bad luck. Then there's the cost. The cost. Traveling on one of these floating luxuries could set you back anywhere from $20 to $40 for a trip from New Orleans to Louisville, about 2 weeks' wages at the time for the average worker. Not exactly pocket change. Meanwhile, freight rates were about 2 cents a ton per mile, which sounds like a bargain until you remember that money didn't stretch quite as far back then. It was the era's equivalent of buying a first-class ticket on a private jet, if the jet had a 1 in 5 chance of not reaching its destination intact. And let's talk about the spectacle of the steamboat itself. Picture this, a 2 to 3 story structure with massive paddle wheels and smokestacks that belched plumes of smoke into the air. It was both a marvel and a menace, a symbol of progress and pollution. These boats were like the rock stars of the river, drawing crowds whenever they arrived at a port. But their very design was their Achilles heel. The same shallow draft that allowed them to navigate the twisty, treacherous Mississippi also made them prone to running aground, or worse, capsizing. So, while steamboats were indeed the technological wonders of their time, they were also the equivalent of playing Russian roulette on water. You had the thrill of innovation and speed, but with a side of danger that only the truly adventurous, or perhaps foolhardy, could embrace. It's the kind of paradox that makes history so utterly fascinating, the blend of awe-inspiring achievements and the gritty realities that accompanied them. There's something undeniably thrilling about that, isn't there? Just remember, as you stand on that deck watching the muddy waters of the Mississippi drift by, you're really part of a grand experiment. An experiment with stakes as high as the smokestacks reaching above you into the sky. And as you're soaking in the smoky view from the deck, let's dive deep into the social fabric woven aboard this floating marvel. It's a microcosm of 19th century America, where class and race were as stratified as the deck levels themselves. Up top, you've got the creme de la creme, wealthy passengers lounging in their plush cabins, possibly with a mint julep in hand, living the high life as they glide down the mighty Mississippi. These are the folks who could afford the $20 to $40 ticket price. Not a trivial amount when you consider it could be 2 weeks' wages for your average Joe back on land. Imagine forking over a fortnight's pay just to rub elbows with society's finest and enjoy a bed that doesn't double as a petri dish. But don't let the fancy furniture fool you into thinking this was a great equalizer. This was no egalitarian utopia. It was more like a gilded cage for the privileged. As Mark Twain observed in Life on the Mississippi, the steamboat was a stage where the drama of society played out in full view. Think of it as the original reality TV, only with better hats and more explosions. Below deck, the scene shifts dramatically. Here you'll find the engine room, a cacophony of labor and sweat that powered this floating palace. Working conditions were grueling, to say the least, a stark reminder that progress often comes with a human cost. The crew was an eclectic mix of backgrounds, a testament to the diverse workforce that drove America's rapid expansion. Many were immigrants, trying to carve out a slice of the American dream, even if it meant stoking fires in sweltering heat. And let's not forget the enslaved people, whose forced labor added another ugly layer to this already complicated picture. It's a grim reality that gives pause to the romantic notion of the steamboat as a symbol of boundless opportunity. The racial and class divisions were palpable. While wealthy passengers dined on fine china, the crew often subsisted on meager rations. First-class passengers enjoyed private cabins with elegant furnishings and sometimes even a piano, while second-class travelers might find themselves crammed into more modest quarters. If you were really down on your luck, you'd be stuck in steerage, sharing your personal space with livestock or freight, and let's be honest, neither is a good conversationalist. Twain, that wry observer of human folly, captured the absurdity of it all. He saw the steamboat as a theater of human ambition and folly, a place where fortunes were made and lost faster than you could say riverboat gambling. And oh, the gambling! It was a pastime as integral to the steamboat experience as the paddle wheel itself. With card games and dice rolling, fortunes changed hands in the blink of an eye, adding a layer of high-stakes drama to the journey. Just remember the house, or in this case the boat, always seemed to win. Yet, while the steamboat promised adventure, it often delivered harsh lessons in social stratification. The myth of the riverboat as a democratic space floats away when you consider the hard realities. The rich got richer, travelers experienced a slice of luxury, and the working class, well, they kept the whole show running, often at great personal risk. The steamboat was a microcosm of America itself, a land of opportunity and inequality, innovation and exploitation. As you wander these decks, you're standing in a space that tells a story as complex and layered as the river it sails. It's a tale of triumph and tragedy, of human ingenuity and folly. So as you lean on the railing, watching the banks of the Mississippi slide by, remember that you're part of a grand tapestry that stretches back through history. And while the journey might seem smooth from up here, it's important to remember the many hands and lives that kept this river of dreams flowing. Stay tuned, because there's still a lot more to uncover on this journey into the past. As you lean over that railing, gazing at the rolling shores of the mighty Mississippi, you're not just witnessing a river, you're staring at the economic juggernaut that powered the growth engine of the 19th century United States. The Mississippi River was like the Amazon prime of its day, only instead of delivering your yoga mat and artisan coffee beans, it was hauling bales of cotton and stacks of timber. And boy, did those steamboats hustle. By the mid-1800s, they were transporting over 3 million bales of cotton a year, each bale weighing around 500 pounds. That's a lot of white fluff, contributing to the textile boom that clothed a nation and padded the pockets of southern plantation owners. Now, visualize this. Steamboats bustling up and down the river like ants at a picnic, each one a floating warehouse of goods. Timber, wheat, coal. If it could be loaded up, a steamboat was hauling it. By some estimates, 40% of all U.S. exports passed through New Orleans, the river's bustling hub, in the 1850. That's a statistic that would make even Jeff Bezos blush. The Mississippi was America's artery, feeding the nation's industrial heart with raw materials and sending finished products back down to the Gulf of Mexico, then out to the world. It was an economic circulatory system vital to the prosperity of an entire nation. But let's hit pause on that romanticized vision for a second and take a peek behind the curtain. The steamboat trade wasn't just a tale of endless progress and prosperity. It was powered by a workforce that bore the brunt of its success. Enslaved people were the silent engines behind the southern economy, and their forced labor was a grim cornerstone of this booming industry. The carton that billowed downriver was picked by hands that never saw a dime for their toil. And let's not forget the immigrants, many of whom found themselves shoveling coal in the sweltering engine rooms, their American dream crushed under the weight of the paddle wheel. And if you think the physical labor was the only price paid, let's talk about Mother Nature's tab. These steamboats weren't exactly eco-friendly. They were more like floating factories, belching smoke and soot into the air as they chugged along. Deforestation was another nasty side effect. Vast stretches of forest were leveled to keep the steam engines fed and the profits flowing. It was a classic tale of short-term gain at long-term cost, a lesson history seems intent on teaching us over and over again. The environmental impact was devastating. The riverbanks were stripped bare, and the air turned thick with the byproducts of progress. It was a bit like throwing a party and forgetting to clean up afterward. The hangover was inevitable. But hey, who's counting when you're sitting on a gold mine of carton and commerce? The Mississippi's steamboat era was a complex tapestry of innovation and exploitation, prosperity and pollution. It was a microcosm of a nation grappling with its identity, torn between the allure of progress and the ethical quagmire it often left in its wake. As you stand on deck, watching the shoreline drift by, you're not just a passive observer. You're smack dab in the middle of a historical paradox, a testament to human ingenuity and its often messy consequences. So, next time you hear the whistle of a steamboat, remember, it's not just a quaint echo from a bygone era. It's the sound of an America that was, at once, both pioneering and deeply flawed. The river may seem serene from afar, but beneath its surface, the waters of history are anything but still. Stay tuned, because there's more to this story, and trust me, you won't want to miss it. Speaking of paradoxes, let's delve into how these steamboats, those smoky titans of the river, played a pivotal role in pushing the United States westward. You see, before steamboats came along, the Mississippi River was like a huge keep-out sign for anyone thinking about heading west. The river was a natural barrier, a wild, untamed force that made Lewis and Clark's journey look like a casual Sunday hike. But with the steamboat era, this mighty river transformed from an obstacle into a superhighway of opportunity. It turned the Mississippi into the backbone of westward expansion, facilitating the movement of people and goods faster than a rumor at a family reunion. The steamboats were the Uber of the 19th century, moving settlers, entrepreneurs, and opportunists to new towns and cities sprouting along the riverbanks. And let's get one thing straight. These weren't sleepy little hamlets. By the 1850, cities like St. Louis and New Orleans were bursting with activity, becoming bustling hubs of commerce and culture. It's like someone took a Jackson Pollock painting and threw it on a map. Suddenly, the Midwest was alive with new settlements dotting the landscape. Now, you might think this westward push was all about waving flags and manifest destiny, but hold your horses. The truth is, it was as much about economics as ideology. The steamboats made it financially viable to move out west and set up shop. It could transport tons of goods, literally tons, at speeds that left their flatboat predecessors in the dust. By slashing travel times and costs, steamboats made the American dream of expansion not just possible but profitable. They were like the original venture capitalists, only with a lot more soot and fewer PowerPoint presentations. But let's not get too misty-eyed about this romanticized westward expansion. The reality was, it was a grab for land and resources, often at the expense of Native American tribes whose lives and lands were upended. The steamboat era wasn't just a golden age of progress. It was also an era of displacement and dispossession. These floating behemoths carried settlers and soldiers alike, often blurring the line between exploration and exploitation. It's a sobering reminder that one person's frontier is another's home. And while we're busting myths, let's tackle the notion of the wild, lawless frontier. Sure, we've got images of riverboat gamblers and gunfights at high noon, but the reality was a whole lot more bureaucratic. River commerce was a tangled web of regulations and red tape. Steamboat captains had to navigate more than just the river currents. They had to deal with tariffs, tolls, and taxes that would make the IRS blush. It was as much about paperwork as paddle wheels. This regulation wasn't just a nuisance, it was a necessity. The Mississippi River was a hotbed of commercial competition, and things could get downright contentious. Take the infamous 1838 sinking of the Moselle, for example. This was no small incident. It was a catastrophe that shook the nation. The Moselle exploded near Cincinnati, killing an estimated 160 passengers. It was a disaster that highlighted the need for stricter safety regulations. The resulting public outcry led to the Steamboat Act of 1852, which mandated safety inspections and licensing for steam engineers. It was like a wake-up call that said, hey, maybe we shouldn't let just anyone drive these fiery death traps. This legislation was a big deal. It was one of the first significant federal regulations of the 19th century, setting a precedent for government oversight of public safety. It was the beginning of what would become a more regulated and arguably safer era of river travel. The Moselle disaster was a stark reminder that progress often comes with a price tag, and sometimes that price is paid in human lives. So, as you sail down the Mississippi on your mental steamboat, remember that this era was both a marvel of innovation and a minefield of human folly. It's a testament to how history is never just black and white, but a swirling mix of ambition and oversight, dreams and disasters. The river itself was a living contradiction, a force of nature tamed by human ingenuity, yet constantly reminding us of its power. The steamboat era was a time when America was finding its feet, both literally and figuratively. It was a period of rapid growth and change, fueled by steam and sweat, ambition and audacity. And while the steamboats may have faded into history, their legacy is still very much with us. They were the engines of expansion, the catalysts of change, and the harbingers of a new America, a nation on the move for better or for worse. So keep your eyes peeled and your ears open because, as we paddle forward in this historical journey, there's still more to uncover. We're not done yet. There are still stories to tell, lessons to learn, and myths to bust. The Mississippi River may seem calm on the surface, but beneath it lies a torrent of history waiting to be discovered. And trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next. But even a mighty river doesn't flow forever without change, and the same goes for the era of the Mississippi steamboat. So, as we sail into the twilight of this journey, let's talk about how the steamboat's paddle wheel slowly got outpaced by progress. Enter the iron horse, the steam locomotive, a game-changer that chugged onto the scene with all the subtlety of a rock concert in a library. By the late 1840s, railroads began to snake their way across the American landscape, offering a faster, more reliable, and often cheaper alternative to river travel. Let's face it, railroads didn't have to worry about sandbars, unpredictable river currents, or the occasional explosive demise. A train could zip along at a blistering speed of 30 miles per hour, leaving the steamboat to eat its dust, literally. By 1860, the U.S. boasted over 30,000 miles of railroad track compared to the winding paths of the river, which were at the mercy of nature and the elements. The economic advantages were undeniable. Railroads slashed the cost of moving goods, which made them the darling of industrialists and tycoons alike. While a steamboat might take days to get from point A to point B, a train could make the same journey in hours. Talk about a commute upgrade. Plus, you didn't have to worry about your cargo taking an unscheduled dive to the riverbed. But let's not toss the steamboat into the historical scrap heap just yet. For a while, it held on, still able to reach those river towns that the railroads hadn't yet connected. But as the iron rails stretched further and further, even the most remote hamlets found themselves linked to this newfangled network. By the 1870, the riding was on the wall, or rather, on the tracks. Steamboats began to decline in numbers and importance, no longer the preferred mode of transport, but a nostalgic relic of a bygone era. Yet, before we start weeping into our mint juleps, let's take a moment to appreciate the legacy these steamboats left behind. They may have been eclipsed by trains, but they were the pioneers of American transportation, proving that speed and connectivity could redefine a nation. The infrastructure they helped build, the cities they fueled, and the commerce they facilitated laid the groundwork for the modern economy. They were the original disruptors, changing the game long before disruption became Silicon Valley's favorite buzzword. And what about the cultural impact? Mark Twain's tales, with their vivid depictions of life on the river, immortalized the steamboat in the American imagination. Even as passenger lists dwindled and freight got rerouted to the rails, the steamboat lingered in our collective memory, a symbol of adventure and opportunity, albeit with a fair share of danger and inequality tossed in for good measure. Now, if you're thinking all this sounds a bit familiar, you're not wrong. The story of steamboats versus railroads is a timeless tale of technological progress, a narrative we see echoed today in the shift from traditional industries to digital economies. Just like the steamboat operators of yore, today's businesses face the challenge of adapting to new technologies or risk being left behind. It's a historical pattern as predictable as a steamboat's whistle, reminding us that innovation is relentless and nostalgia doesn't pay the bills. But let's not get too cynical. The steamboat era teaches us about the double-edged sword of progress. It was a time of breathtaking advancement, but also of stark inequalities and environmental impacts that are eerily similar to the challenges we face now. As we forge ahead into our own future, it's worth remembering these lessons. That progress must be tempered with responsibility, and that every innovation carries with it the seeds of its own obsolescence. So as you disembark from this mental voyage, take a moment to appreciate the complex tapestry of history, the good, the bad, and the steam-powered. The riverboats may have drifted into the annals of history, but their echoes still ripple through time, reminding us of a world in constant flux, forever sailing toward the horizon. The Mycenaean civilization, a name that might not roll off the tongue as easily as, say, Greek salad, but boy, did they lay down some serious foundations. Think of them as the ancient world's overachieving older sibling, setting the bar high in the Mediterranean neighborhood. Around 1600 to 1100 BCE, the Mycenaeans were rocking their own corner of the Aegean, essentially writing the prequel to what would become classical Greece. These folks were the original influencers before TikTok, weaving a tapestry of culture that would echo through the ages. Geographically speaking, the Mycenaeans were like the Goldilocks of the ancient world, not too far from the mountains, not too close to the sea, but just right in the fertile plains of what is now southern Greece. Their sprawling territory included major cities like Mycenae, naturally, Tiryns, and Pylos, a triad of powerhouses that were the Silicon Valley of ancient times, minus the electric scooters and artisanal coffee shops. Now, let's talk buildings. If skyscrapers are the modern monuments to human ambition, Mycenaean palatial centers were their ancient counterparts. These architectural wonders weren't just living spaces, they were statements. We're talking about walls so thick they practically screamed, we mean business. The famous Lion Gate at Mycenae, for example, is not just an entrance. It's a testament to their mastery of design and a subtle flex of their artistic prowess. These folks knew how to stack stones in a way that would make even the most seasoned Minecraft player nod in admiration. But these palaces weren't just for show. They were the nerve centers of Mycenaean society, bustling with activity. Picture bustling courtyards filled with artisans, traders, and bureaucrats all working under the watchful eyes of the Wanax, the king of the castle. This was no democracy. It was a top-down operation where the king held the reins, and everyone else was along for the ride. Economically, the Mycenaeans were quite the savvy operators. Bronze was the backbone of their economy, much like oil is today. They hoarded it, traded it, and crafted it into weapons and tools that powered their military and economic might. You see, in the Mycenaean world, bronze was to them what Wi-Fi is to us, essential for getting anything done. Their trade networks stretched far and wide, from Cyprus and Egypt to the distant shores of Italy, bringing in precious metals, luxury goods, and no doubt the latest in ancient gossip. But don't let the grandeur fool you. Life for the average Mycenaean wasn't all palaces and prosperity. The glitz of the ruling class often overshadowed the realities of those at the bottom. Laborers who built those mighty walls and the farmers who tilled the fields were the unsung heroes, their stories lost to the ages while the kings basked in the glory. It's a tale as old as time, the few living large on the backs of the many. And then there's the mythology. The Mycenaeans knew how to spin a good yarn. Their tales of gods and heroes would later be immortalized by Homer. Think of the Iliad, and the Odyssey as the ancient world's blockbuster series. These stories, filled with larger-than-life characters and epic battles, capture the imagination even today. Yet, behind every heroic saga lies the gritty reality of a society grappling with war, politics, and survival. As we delve deeper into the Mycenaean world, we'll see how their culture and innovations set the stage for the classical Greek era. From their architectural marvels to their economic strategies, they laid the groundwork for a civilization that would inspire the ages. So buckle up, because the journey through the Mycenaean age is just getting started, and it's as thrilling as a chariot race down the corridors of history. Now, let's zoom in on the Mycenaean economy, which was as layered and complex as a baklava, but far less sweet. You see, while the palatial elite were busy living the high life, the Mycenaean economy was a beast that needed constant feeding. Forget the romanticized vision of a harmonious utopia where everyone held hands and sang Cumbaya. The reality was more like a precarious balancing act, with trade routes that stretched across the Mediterranean like the network of an ancient Amazon prime, only without the next-day delivery. Trade was the lifeblood of the Mycenaean world, and their reach was impressively vast. They had their fingers in all sorts of economic pies, from the copper of Cyprus to the gold of Egypt. These trade networks weren't just for show, they were a matter of survival. The Mycenaeans weren't exactly sitting on a treasure trove of natural resources, so they had to reach out and touch someone, metaphorically speaking. And touch they did, setting up trade with regions as far-flung as Anatolia and the Levant, navigating the seas in ships that were the ancient equivalent of semis barreling down the interstate. But maintaining these trade routes wasn't a walk in the park. It was more like a marathon through a minefield, with piracy, storms, and political tensions lurking at every turn. The cost of keeping these networks alive was astronomical. Imagine burning through more drachmas than a Greek wedding burns through plates. And let's not forget the human toll. Sailors risked life and limb, navigating treacherous waters while hoping not to become a footnote in history swallowed by the sea. Now, let's talk commodities, shall we? Olive oil was the Mycenaean economy's MVP, the golden liquid that lubricated the wheels of trade. This wasn't just a salad dressing. It was the ancient world's Swiss Army knife, used for cooking, lighting, and even as a base for perfumes. The Mycenaean olive oil industry was a well-oiled machine, if you'll pardon the pun. They cultivated olive trees with the dedication of a Silicon Valley startup, and the fruits of their labor flowed through trade routes like liquid gold. But the olive oil trade wasn't just a sweet deal for everyone. It was a double-edged sword. While the elite profited handsomely, the peasants who tended the olive groves and pressed the oil were stuck doing the ancient version of gig work. Hard labor with little to show for it. It's a tale as old as time. The few reaping the benefits while the many bear the brunt. And let's not forget the social stratification that came with it. The economic divide was as wide as the Aegean, with a rigid hierarchy that made social mobility about as likely as Zeus apologizing for his indiscretions. The high cost of sustaining such an intricate economy often meant that the Mycenaeans had to get creative or desperate. Barter and trade were the name of the game, and it wasn't uncommon for goods to be exchanged for services in a way that would make any modern-day gig worker nod in weary recognition. Chariots, a symbol of prestige and power, might be traded for grain or livestock, illustrating the lengths to which the Mycenaeans would go to keep their economic engine running. Of course, the palatial centers were the beating heart of this economic machine. These were not just places of opulence, but administrative hubs that controlled the flow of goods like a maestro conducting an orchestra. Records etched into clay tablets reveal a world of meticulous bookkeeping, with scribes documenting everything from grain rations to the distribution of luxury goods. It's enough to make any modern accountant break out in a cold sweat. But as with any system founded on inequality, the cracks eventually began to show. The costs of maintaining such a vast network, coupled with internal pressures and external threats, would eventually contribute to the civilization's decline. Yet, while the Mycenaean economy was complex and fraught with challenges, it laid the groundwork for the economic systems that would follow. They were the architects of an economic legacy that would resonate for centuries, setting the stage for classical Greece's golden age. So, the next time you drizzle a little olive oil over your salad, spare a thought for those ancient Mycenaeans. They may have been navigating a gig economy of their own, but their legacy is anything but ancient history. Stay tuned as we continue to unravel the intricate tapestry of Mycenaean life, where myths meet reality, and the past continues to echo through the corridors of time. So, as you swirl that olive oil over your salad, consider that the Mycenaeans were not just economic whizzes, but also the original masterminds of Mediterranean power politics. Picture this: a civilization where the idea of diplomacy involved as much sword-waving as it did olive branch extending. The Mycenaeans operated in a political landscape that was as volatile as a reality TV show, but with more bronze and fewer confessionals. They were like the ancient world's power brokers, wielding influence through strategic alliances, and when necessary, a good old-fashioned display of military might. Now, speaking of military might, let's dive into the not-so-rosy realities of the Mycenaean armed forces. Forget the Hollywood glamorization of heroic warfare. The reality was as gritty as a battlefield on a rainy day. The Mycenaeans were no strangers to war, and their reputation as fierce warriors was both earned and embellished. They're famously linked to the Trojan War, a tale that Homer spun into one of history's greatest epics. But before you get carried away envisioning Achilles and his invincible heel, let's talk about the guy who had to manage the logistics. Because, let's face it, behind every Achilles, there's a quartermaster counting spears, shields, and sandals. Running a military campaign in the ancient world was like trying to organize a festival without modern amenities. Think about the Herculean task of feeding thousands of troops. You don't just order pizzas for an army. You muster livestock, grain, and wine, lots of wine. And while the warriors were out doing their thing, someone had to ensure supplies kept rolling in. If you've ever tried to plan a family reunion, you can appreciate the logistical nightmare of keeping an army battle-ready. And the costs, astronomical. Maintaining a war machine required resources that stretched the Mycenaean economy to its limits. Bronze weapons were the bread and butter of their military might, but they didn't come cheap. The production of swords, spears, and chariots demanded a steady supply of copper and tin, metals that had to be traded for, hoarded, and sometimes fought over. If you thought building a house was expensive, try outfitting an army. The Mycenaeans' military exploits weren't just about expanding territory. They were also about securing trade routes and resources. Control the trade routes, and you control the flow of wealth. It was a game of geopolitical chess, with stakes higher than Mount Olympus. But of course, war is more than just a game of strategy. It's a brutal affair with a human cost. For every hero immortalized in epic poetry, countless others remain nameless, their sacrifices buried beneath the weight of history. So, let's talk logistics. Imagine coordinating a supply chain without GPS, emails, or spreadsheets. Communication was crucial, and the Mycenaeans relied on a network of messengers and signal fires, an ancient version of texting, if you will. But the margin for error was as wide as the Aegean Sea. A miscommunication or delay could mean the difference between victory and disaster. All this brings us back to the Trojan War. Ah, the Trojan War, a story that has everything: love, betrayal, and a wooden horse that would make any Trojan horse meme proud. But let's separate fact from fiction. Was there really a Helen whose face launched 1,000 ships, or was it more about control of the trade-rich region of Troy? Historians today debate whether the war was a historical event or a mythologized conflict, but what's clear is that it captured the Mycenaean spirit of conquest and ambition. Now, let's fast forward to the fall of this once mighty civilization. How did the Mycenaeans, with their indomitable fortresses and seemingly invincible armies, end up in history's bargain bin? Theories abound, but it wasn't just one thing that did them in. It was a perfect storm of factors. Internal strife, natural disasters, and the ever-looming threat of invasion from the mysterious sea peoples played their part. It's like the universe conspired to give the Mycenaeans a lesson in humility. By around 1100 BCE, the Mycenaean world was unraveling. Their palatial centers, once buzzing with life, fell silent. The intricate trade networks collapsed, and the art of riding, a key to their administrative prowess, was lost. It was as if the lights went out on a civilization that had shone so brightly. But while the Mycenaeans themselves faded, their cultural legacy endured. The stories, ideas, and innovations they left behind would lay the groundwork for the classical Greek civilization that followed. In the end, the Mycenaean saga is a cautionary tale of power, ambition, and the fragility of civilization. It's a reminder that regardless of how invincible a society may seem, it's only as strong as its foundation. As we continue to peel back the layers of history, we find that the past is never truly past. It's a living narrative, echoing through time with lessons that resonate even today. So, as we press on through the corridors of the Mycenaean age, remember, history is not just about dates and events, but about the people who lived, dreamed, and sometimes faltered in their quest to leave a mark on the world. Stay tuned for more revelations as we explore the cultural and social tapestry of this fascinating civilization, because the story of the Mycenaeans is far from over. If you think the Mycenaeans were just a bunch of helmet-wearing warriors with an affinity for starting wars over stolen brides, think again. Sure, they knew their way around a battlefield, but they also happened to be cultural powerhouses. Let's dive into their artistic and literary achievements, shall we? Spoiler alert, it's way more than just heroics and horseplay. First up on our cultural tour, Linear B tablets. These are the ancient equivalent of a Microsoft Excel spreadsheet, but with fewer errors and more clay. Discovered in the ruins of Pylos and Knossos, these tablets give us a peek into the Mycenaean world, complete with bureaucratic records that would make a modern tax accountant weep with both envy and sympathy. Picture this, a scribe hunched over a clay tablet, painstakingly inscribing lists of sheep, grain, and, oh joy, more sheep. Forget Achilles and Hector. The real heroes here might just be the ancient bean counters who kept the whole show running. And what a show it was. The Mycenaeans weren't just tallying up livestock. They were laying down the linguistic groundwork for future civilizations. Linear B is the earliest form of Greek, and while it doesn't tell us whether Helen really was that beautiful, it does reveal a lot about the mundane side of Mycenaean life. These tablets are buzzing with details about taxes, rations, and even textile production. It's like peeking into the supply cupboard of history, where every epic saga needs a good stock of barley and wool. But let's not get carried away with logistics. The Mycenaeans also left a legacy in the arts. Their frescoes, for instance, are a riot of color and movement. Think of them as the Instagram of the ancient world, capturing everything from grand hunting scenes to people just getting on with their lives. Unlike the later austere lines of classical Greek art, Mycenaean frescoes are all about exuberance and energy. They didn't shy away from depicting the vibrant chaos of life, whether it was a boar hunt or a dance party that could rival any modern rave. And speaking of stories, the Mycenaeans also had a hand in shaping the myths and legends that would later define Greek culture. While they might not have penned the Iliad themselves, their exploits and adventures certainly laid the groundwork for Homer's tales. The Mycenaeans might not have had a Twitter account, but they sure knew how to leave a lasting impression. Their tales of gods and mortals, woven into the fabric of their culture, would echo through the ages. But let's not get too starry-eyed about these ancient storytellers. Behind every epic saga is the unglamorous truth of mundane daily life. The Linear B tablets, for example, reveal that the Mycenaeans were meticulous record keepers, with entries that include everything from chariot wheels to piglets. Yes, the same civilization that inspired tales of divine heroes also had to deal with inventory shortages and bureaucratic headaches. It's a delightful reminder that while gods and goddesses might battle it out in the skies, someone on the ground had to keep track of the olive oil. The bureaucratic backbone of the Mycenaean civilization was as intricate as their palatial frescoes. The administrative records show a society structured like a well-oiled machine, or at least one that desperately tried to be. The Wanax, or king, was at the top, flanked by a network of officials who ensured the smooth operation of the palatial centers. This was no casual arrangement. It was a carefully choreographed dance of power and responsibility. And like any dance, when someone missed a step, the entire performance risked falling apart. So, what does all this tell us about the Mycenaeans? Well, it's a classic case of don't judge a civilization by its war stories. Sure, they could wield a sword, but they were also masters of administration, art, and storytelling. Their influence seeped into the world of classical Greece, shaping everything from language to legend. And while the heroes of epic tales might have hogged the spotlight, the real story lies with the ordinary men and women who kept the wheels turning. In essence, the Mycenaean civilization was a complex tapestry of grandeur and grit, not unlike our own world. They navigated the challenges of their time with a blend of ambition and pragmatism that will be perfectly at home in the modern era. So, the next time you hear the thunderous tales of their heroes, remember the quiet scribes and artisans who helped craft their legacy. Because at its heart, history is not just about grand gestures, but the everyday moments that build a civilization. As we continue to peel back the layers of Mycenaean culture, remember that the past is never truly past. It's a living narrative, echoing through time with lessons that resonate even today. And while the Mycenaean age may have ended, their stories, and the truths they reveal, continue to captivate us. So, stay tuned for more revelations as we explore the cultural and social tapestry of this fascinating civilization. The story of the Mycenaeans is far from over, and there are still plenty of mysteries to unravel. And so, as we peel back the layers of Mycenaean culture, we find ourselves marveling not just at their achievements, but at the echoes of their legacy that ripple through history. The Mycenaeans might have vanished into the sands of time around 1100 BCE, but their cultural footprint is as indelible as a viral tweet. To understand the Mycenaeans is to glimpse the roots of Western civilization itself, a testament to their enduring influence on the world. Take the Greek language, for instance. Linear B, the scribbled ancestor of Greek, is like the linguistic Rosetta Stone that unlocked a whole new world. It's not just the words they carved into clay tablets. It's the syntax, the grammar, the very structure of communication that laid the groundwork for classical Greek. And from there, it spiraled into Latin, the lingua franca of the Roman Empire, and eventually the Romance languages. Imagine a butterfly flapping its wings in Mycenae and causing a literary storm across millennia. It's a linguistic domino effect, with words toppling through time. But language is just the tip of the iceberg. The Mycenaeans also passed down the torch of myth and legend, lighting the way for the cultural renaissance of classical Greece. Those captivating tales of gods, heroes, and epic battles didn't just entertain. They shaped the moral and philosophical framework of Western thought. Characters like Achilles and Odysseus, who once roamed the halls of Mycenaean palaces, found new life in Homer's epics. And while the real Achilles probably didn't have a heel as infamous as his legend, his story underscores how myths can transcend reality, offering timeless lessons on hubris and heroism. Yet, let's not get swept away by the romance of it all. Behind every legend lies a gritty reality. The Mycenaeans, for all their epic narratives, were also a society grappling with the harsh economics of survival. Their agricultural practices, trade networks, and military exploits weren't just for show. They were necessary strategies in a world where resources were as scarce as a good Wi-Fi signal in the mountains. The palatial complexes, while architecturally impressive, were also powerhouses of economic and political control, orchestrating the flow of goods and labor with the precision of a maestro conducting a symphony. The Mycenaean economic network was as elaborate as a modern stock market, with trade routes stretching their influence across the Mediterranean. And while they didn't have the benefit of modern financial instruments, they did have something just as powerful: relationships. Alliances forged through marriage, diplomacy, and, occasionally, the tip of a spear, were the currency of the Mycenaean world. Their ability to maintain such a vast network of influence is a testament to their political savvy, a reminder that even in the ancient world, who you knew was often as important as what you had. And let's not forget the social fabric that held this civilization together. The Mycenaeans were a hierarchical society where status was as rigid as the walls of their citadels. The Wanax, or king, ruled with an iron fist, and beneath him was a carefully structured bureaucracy that managed everything from grain rations to military campaigns. It was a top-down world, where power flowed from the peak of the palatial pyramid and trickled down to the common folk. This hierarchical structure would later influence the political systems of classical Greece, where democracy would eventually take root, albeit in a form that still favored the elite. Despite their eventual downfall, the Mycenaean legacy is woven into the very fabric of Western civilization. Their myths, language, political structures, and economic strategies laid the foundation for the rise of classical Greece, which in turn influenced the Roman Empire, the Renaissance, and beyond. It's a historical relay race, with each civilization passing the baton of knowledge and innovation to the next. In reflecting on the Mycenaeans, we're reminded of the cyclical nature of history. Civilizations rise and fall, leaving behind fragments of their existence that shape the future. The Mycenaeans, with their tales of gods and heroes, their monumental architecture, and their complex society, serve as a poignant reminder that the past is never truly past. It's a living narrative, echoing through time with lessons that resonate even today. And as we ponder their legacy, we can't help but draw parallels to our modern world. The Mycenaeans, with their ambitious projects and grand narratives, were not so different from us. They too lived in a world of uncertainty and sought to impose order through innovation and storytelling. Their ability to adapt, to weave tales that captivated the imagination, is a timeless human trait. So, what can we learn from the Mycenaeans? Perhaps it's the importance of balance. Their civilization, for all its grandeur, was ultimately undone by the very forces that propelled it forward. Their story is a cautionary tale about the perils of unchecked ambition and the fragility of even the mightiest empires. But it's also a story of resilience and innovation, of a civilization that dared to dream, and in doing so, left an indelible mark on history. In the end, the Mycenaean legacy is a rich tapestry of myth and reality, a reminder that the stories we tell shape the world we live in. As we navigate our modern myths, whether they be the American dream or the promise of technological utopia, we do well to remember the lessons of the Mycenaeans. Because if history has taught us anything, it's that, while civilizations may come and go, the stories they leave behind are eternal. And so, as we close the chapter on the Mycenaeans, we leave with a newfound appreciation for their world, a world that, for all its differences, mirrors our own in surprising ways. It's a world where myths and realities intertwine, where the past informs the present, and where history is not just a series of events, but a living narrative that continues to unfold. So here's to the Mycenaeans, the ancient overachievers who remind us that the journey through history is as thrilling as any epic adventure. In the bustling streets of 161 AD Rome, where marble statues of gods mingled with the aromas of street vendors, selling everything from fermented fish sauce to exotic spices, a baby boy was born with a silver spoon so big it might as well have been a scepter. Meet Commodus, the future Roman emperor who would grow up to swap the typical imperial laurels for something a bit more gladiatorial. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. We're diving into the early life of this notorious chosen one, where the pressures of being the son of Marcus Aurelius came with their own unique set of challenges, and a golden rattle to boot. Now, here's the deal with Commodus. He wasn't your average Roman kid. While others were busy playing with wooden swords and dreaming of chariot races, Commodus was being groomed for greatness, or at least greatness as defined by Roman standards. Born on August 31, 161 AD, he was the 10th child of Marcus Aurelius and his wife, Faustina the Younger. But don't let the number fool you. Only a few of his siblings survived infancy, a common reality in the ancient world that was about as gentle as a lion in the Colosseum. Growing up in the imperial palace wasn't all toga parties and endless games of knucklebones. The air was thick with expectations, and the family dynamics were as complex as a Roman mosaic. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher king, was big on stoicism, which is pretty much ancient Rome's answer to the keep calm and carry on mantra. He penned Meditations, a text that's still on some self-help shelves today. But while Dad was busy pondering the virtues of self-restraint and duty, young Commodus was more interested in testing the limits of both. Commodus' early education was rigorous, to say the least. Tutors were the era's equivalent of personal trainers, pushing him through lessons in rhetoric, philosophy, and military strategy. However, Commodus wasn't exactly the teacher's pet. One might say he preferred a more hands-on approach. Think swordplay over scrolls. His penchant for the theatrical was evident even as a child. Anecdotes suggest he once ordered a servant to be thrown into an oven for making his bath too cold. Luckily for the servant, the punishment was downgraded, but it was an early sign that Commodus had a flair for the dramatic. Despite the occasional power play, the young prince wasn't all bad. He had a twin brother, Titus Aurelius Fulvus Antoninus, who died young, leaving Commodus with a heightened sense of his own mortality, or maybe just a recognition that life was too short for stoicism. His surviving family, including his sisters, Lucilla and Fadilla, played significant roles in his life, sometimes as allies and other times as political pawns in a game of imperial chess. As he grew, the shadow of Marcus Aurelius loomed large. Here was a man hailed as one of the 5 good emperors, an accolade that came with some serious sandals to fill. Yet, Commodus seemed more interested in the Roman pastime of spectacle than in philosophical musings. It was less about the Stoic lessons on virtue and more about the thrill of the arena, a hint of the gladiatorial passions that would later define his reign. Roman society had its own set of quirks, and being the emperor's son came with perks and pitfalls. For one, Commodus was always under the watchful eyes of advisors, generals, and sycophants eager to shape the young heir's worldview. The political landscape was a minefield, with plots and schemes as common as bread and circuses. The Senate was both a revered institution and a potential adversary, depending on who held the power. For a young Commodus, the question was never just how to rule, but how to navigate the treacherous waters of Roman politics without capsizing. But there was more to Commodus than just the makings of a future ruler. Growing up in an empire that stretched from Britain to Egypt, he was exposed to a cultural melting pot that would influence his tastes and interests. The spectacle of the games, the allure of power, and the intoxicating mix of fear and adoration from the masses were all part of the education he received outside the classroom. And let's not forget the family trips. While Dad was off on military campaigns, young Commodus might have tagged along, getting a crash course in the realities of empire building. His early signs of an unorthodox personality weren't just confined to his odd punishments or theatrical streaks. He was said to have shown an early disinterest in the traditional duties expected of a young Roman noble. While his father was busy embodying the ideal of a Roman emperor with a side of philosopher, Commodus seemed more inclined towards the grandeur and excess that Rome could offer. A bit like choosing the circus over the Senate, if you will. All these elements, family pressures, societal expectations, and personal inclinations, converged to shape Commodus into a figure that history would remember as both a spectacle and a cautionary tale. The stage was set, the players in place, and young Commodus was ready to step into the spotlight, though perhaps not in the way Marcus Aurelius ever intended. As the saying goes, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, unless, of course, the apple has a penchant for wrestling lions. Now, as young Commodus teetered on the edge of adulthood, the empire was his playground, a vast expanse stretching from the fog-shrouded coasts of Britannia to the sun-baked sands of Egypt. But Commodus wasn't just playing catch with destiny. He was about to catch the imperial crown at the ripe old age of 18. Talk about an early career start. Picture it, 180 AD, a year that would see Rome's political landscape take a dramatic twist worthy of its own theatrical production. Marcus Aurelius, revered as one of the 5 good emperors, had been the philosophical backbone of Rome. His reign was marked by a balance of military campaigns and stoic wisdom, a delicate dance that kept the empire relatively stable. But like any great performance, it had to end, and in March of 180 AD, Marcus Aurelius took his final bow. Enter stage right, Commodus. Now, if you were expecting a smooth transition, think again. Marcus Aurelius' death was like pulling the rug out from under a very large, very organized Roman household. Commodus' ascension was unexpected, not because it was unplanned. Marcus had made sure his son would follow in his footsteps, but because nobody expected the young emperor to immediately start marching to the beat of his own drum. At 18, most people are figuring out life, maybe wondering if they should finally read Meditations. Commodus. He was busy redefining what it meant to be emperor with a flair for the theatrical that would have made any playwright jealous. The PR machine of ancient Rome spun into high gear, presenting Commodus as the golden boy of the empire. But let's peel back that glossy veneer and see what's underneath. Commodus' leadership style was less stoic philosopher and more star of the latest gladiatorial blockbuster. Unlike his father, who had an almost allergic reaction to public spectacle, Commodus thrived in the limelight. His initial public image was carefully curated to reflect a youthful, energetic ruler ready to lead Rome into a new era. But behind the scenes, his decisions were often guided by personal whim rather than strategic foresight. Economically, Rome was still a powerhouse, but it was a complex machine requiring a steady hand to manage its various parts. The empire was like a massive, ancient spreadsheet with entries from tax revenue to military expenses. Under Marcus, the military had been a priority, with campaigns that strained the empire's coffers but ensured its borders were secure. Commodus, however, had other plans. He opted for peace treaties over continued military campaigns, a choice that was as much about preserving his popularity as it was about conserving resources. This decision was a double-edged sword. While it brought a temporary reprieve from warfare's financial drain, it also left Rome's territories more vulnerable in the long run. The Senate, that venerable institution of Roman politics, was less than thrilled with Commodus' approach. Imagine a room full of seasoned politicians, used to a certain decorum, suddenly finding themselves dealing with an emperor who seemed more interested in the next grand spectacle than in the nitty-gritty of governance. Commodus' relationship with the Senate was rocky at best, marked by mutual distrust. He viewed them as relics of a bygone era, while they saw him as an unpredictable force, more concerned with personal glory than the state's welfare. In terms of governance, Commodus' early decisions were a mixed bag. He maintained his father's advisors, initially, perhaps recognizing that even a young emperor could benefit from experienced counsel. But it wasn't long before he began replacing them with his own favorites, often chosen for their ability to entertain rather than their political acumen. It was like swapping out a seasoned pit crew for clowns who could juggle. Commodus' preference for the theatrical over the tactical was evident in more than just his choice of advisors. He took a hands-on approach to public entertainment, not just attending gladiatorial games, but participating in them. This wasn't entirely unheard of. Emperors had long associated themselves with the games to curry favor with the masses. But Commodus took it to a whole new level, stepping into the arena himself. It was a PR move that simultaneously thrilled and horrified the Roman populace. On one hand, you had an emperor who was literally fighting for the people's entertainment. On the other, the spectacle made a mockery of imperial dignity. It was like watching a modern CEO moonlight as a YouTube stuntman. While Commodus' antics in the arena were a hit with the masses, they did little to endear him to the upper echelons of Roman society. Aristocrats and senators saw his actions as unbecoming of an emperor, a sentiment that only widened the rift between Commodus and Rome's traditional power brokers. Yet, for the average Roman, Commodus was a living legend. He was the embodiment of the larger-than-life heroes of myth and lore, the kind of figure who could inspire both awe and disbelief in equal measure. As his reign progressed, the emperor's penchant for theatrical displays extended to the political sphere. Commodus was less about subtle diplomacy and more about grand gestures. He renamed Rome's months after himself, because why not cement your legacy in the calendar? He even declared himself the new Hercules, complete with a lion's skin and club. Never mind that the real Herc was a fictional character from Greek mythology. For Commodus, reality was just another stage for the performance of a lifetime. With every grand spectacle, Commodus seemed to drift further from the practicalities of leadership. Yet, his reign wasn't without its successes. By reducing military campaigns, he did manage to bring a period of relative peace, allowing Rome's economy a chance to recover from the constant strain of warfare. Trade flourished, and many regions enjoyed a brief respite from the chaos of battle. But like any story, this one had its darker undercurrents. Behind the scenes, corruption festered, and the seeds of discontent were sown, waiting for the right moment to sprout. Our tale of Commodus' rise is not just a story of power and spectacle, but a reflection of Rome itself, a city and empire captivated by the grandeur of its own mythos, even when the reality was far less glamorous. Commodus, with his gladiatorial flair and theatrical leadership, was both a product and a shaper of his time. As we continue to unravel the layers of his reign, remember this. In Rome, the line between legend and reality was often as thin as the veil of a gladiator's helmet. Stay tuned for the next act, where the emperor's love for the arena and the games becomes more than just a pastime. It becomes a defining feature of his rule, setting the stage for both triumph and tragedy. As Commodus took center stage in the Colosseum, it wasn't just swords and shields clashing. It was the sound of an empire grappling with its own identity. Here was an emperor who wasn't content with merely ruling. He wanted to be the main attraction, the ultimate gladiator in a city that lived and breathed spectacle. But let's not sugarcoat it. Commodus entering the arena was about as fitting as a lion playing fetch. The emperor's hobby wasn't just a personal quirk. It was an extravaganza that had Rome raising its eyebrows and emptying its treasury. Now, if you're wondering how often Commodus strutted his stuff in the arena, let's just say he was more frequent than a bad case of the hiccups. According to historical accounts, he participated in the games over 735 times. Yes, you heard that right, 735. He wasn't just dabbling, he was practically a full-time gladiator. His matches were the ancient equivalent of a rock concert, complete with roaring crowds and a VIP section of senators who probably wished they were anywhere but there. But hold on, before you picture Commodus as some kind of ancient UFC champion, let's talk logistics. He was an emperor, after all, and the odds were stacked in his favor like a deck of cards at a rigged poker game. More often than not, his opponents were either poorly armed or conveniently disabled. Forget fair fights. Commodus was about as likely to lose as a modern billionaire running a three-legged race against toddlers. And what about those delusions of grandeur? Oh, Commodus had those in spades. He didn't just see himself as a warrior, he fancied himself the reincarnation of Hercules, complete with lion skins and a club. Let's pause here for a moment and appreciate the sheer audacity of it all. In a city where mythology was practically a second language, Commodus was rewriting the script. To him, reality was just another story waiting to be molded to his liking. But here's the kicker. While Commodus was busy smashing straw dummies and dispatching easy prey, the real battle was being fought on the economic front. Gladiatorial games weren't cheap, and Commodus' frequent forays into the arena were bleeding Rome dry. Imagine hosting the Super Bowl every other weekend, complete with all the trimmings. The costs were astronomical. Each event required training, armaments, and logistics, not to mention the upkeep of the Colosseum itself. Rome's coffers, once robust from taxes and tributes, were being drained faster than a toga party's wine supply. To cover the costs, Commodus resorted to creative financial strategies that would make even the most imaginative accountant blush. He devalued the currency, reducing the silver content in Roman coins, a move that might have temporarily patched the financial leak but ultimately undermined economic stability. It was like fixing a flood with a bucket full of holes. Inflation soared, and the purchasing power of the average Roman plummeted like a poorly thrown javelin. The Senate, meanwhile, was caught in a bind. As Commodus reveled in his warrior fantasies, they watched Rome's financial health crumble like a stale loaf of bread. But openly opposing an emperor who fancied himself a demigod, that's a one-way ticket to the afterlife. So, they grumbled in hushed tones and plotted in shadowy corners, all while maintaining the facade of loyalty. It was political theater at its finest, complete with all the tragedy and comedy one could muster. For the common Roman, Commodus' reign was a double-edged sword. On one hand, the games were an escape, a chance to forget the drudgery of daily life and lose oneself in the thrill of the spectacle. But the price of admission was steep, paid in the form of rising prices and dwindling resources. The emperor's antics might have been entertaining, but they were also a constant reminder of the widening chasm between Rome's glittering past and its uncertain future. Yet, despite the mounting economic woes, Commodus remained a popular figure among the masses. His charisma was undeniable, and his ability to capture the public's imagination was second to none. In an empire that thrived on legends, Commodus was both a living myth and a cautionary tale, a reminder that the line between hero and hubris was as thin as a gladiator's blade. As his reign continued, Commodus' grip on reality grew increasingly tenuous. He began to rename months after himself, as if time itself were another arena to conquer. The city of Rome was rechristened Colonia Commodiana, a move that had about as much subtlety as a chariot crashing through a pottery shop. For Commodus, every day was another chance to cement his legacy, even if it meant rewriting history in his own image. But the real world has a way of intruding on even the most carefully crafted narratives, and for Commodus, the clock was ticking. His reign, marked by spectacle and excess, was a house of cards teetering in the wind. Behind the scenes, dissatisfaction festered, and the whispers of rebellion grew louder. The emperor who had once commanded the arena with such ease was now facing a challenge far more formidable than any gladiator, a restless empire, eager for change. As we move forward in this saga, remember that the story of Commodus is not just about an emperor who fought in the arena, but a man who dared to blur the lines between myth and reality. In the world of ancient Rome, where gods and mortals walked side by side, Commodus was both a product of his time and a harbinger of things to come. Stay tuned, because the final act is yet to unfold, and the stage is set for a dramatic climax that will leave you questioning what it truly means to wield power. For Commodus, the stage was set, but the audience was growing restless. The emperor's relentless self-aggrandizement might have played well to the cheap seats, but for the political elite and the Senate, it was like watching a tragicomedy where the punchline was the empire itself. Commodus' reign, though marked by a certain panache, was also a study in the art of alienating the very foundations that held Rome together. Let's dive into the spicy political soup that was the Roman Empire under Commodus. You see, he had a knack for turning the Senate, a crucial institution, into something akin to a rubber stamp factory for his whims. While his predecessors had walked a tightrope of respect and power-sharing, Commodus was more about bulldozing his way through the political landscape. Picture him as the bull in Rome's china shop, smashing traditions with an almost gleeful abandon. For starters, Commodus viewed the Senate with about as much regard as a lion does its breakfast. His dismissive attitude wasn't just a personality quirk, it was a strategic blunder. The Senate, despite its flaws, was the backbone of Roman political life. Alienating, it was akin to trying to steer a ship without a rudder. He surrounded himself with yes-men who were more interested in keeping their heads attached to their necks than offering sound advice. It was as if Commodus had taken a leaf out of the manual for how to lose friends and alienate people. Economically, the empire was wobbling like a tipsy toga party. Commodus' focus on spectacle over substance meant that the treasury was bleeding out faster than a gladiator in a grudge match. His financial policies, or lack thereof, created a perfect storm of economic instability. As mentioned earlier, he devalued the currency, a short-term fix that made Roman coins about as trustworthy as a used chariot salesman. Inflation was the specter haunting the empire, eroding the wealth of its citizens and shaking the very foundations of Rome's commercial prowess. And let's not forget the provinces, those far-flung corners of the empire that were often treated like the unwanted guests at a family reunion. Commodus' disinterest in military campaigns, while initially a relief, left these regions at the mercy of external threats and internal dissent. The peace he brokered was as fragile as an amphora of wine in an earthquake. The stability that Marcus Aurelius had fought tooth and nail to achieve was unraveling, and the provinces were feeling the brunt. Yet, for all his blunders, Commodus remained a master of public relations, at least among the common folk. His gladiatorial exploits were the stuff of legend, even if those legends were more fiction than fact. The people adored him, their cheers echoing through the Colosseum like a thunderous symphony. To them, Commodus was a living hero, a man-god who could slay beasts and entertain the masses. But behind the scenes, the strings of power were being pulled by those who had grown tired of his antics. Enter the conspiracy, a plotline worthy of a Roman soap opera with all the intrigue and betrayal you could shake a toga at. It wasn't just the Senate that was plotting. It was a coalition of disgruntled officials, palace insiders, and those who had once been close to the imperial ear. Even his own inner circle was beginning to see the writing on the wall, or rather, the graffiti on the fresco. By 192 AD, Commodus' reign was teetering on the brink, and the plotters had their eyes set on a dramatic finale. The emperor's proclivities for grandeur and delusion had left him vulnerable, and his inner circle knew it. The once untouchable emperor, who had fancied himself a demigod, was now a target for those who saw his removal as the only way to save Rome from itself. The conspiracy came to a head like a pressure cooker without a release valve. It was New Year's Eve, and as Rome prepared to welcome a new year, the plotters prepared to usher in a new era. The plan was as audacious as Commodus' own self-image. The emperor, who had survived countless staged battles in the arena, was about to face his most formidable opponent yet, his own hubris. The assassination plot was orchestrated with the precision of a Roman military campaign. The conspirators, including his chamberlain and possibly even his lover, Marcia, knew that subtlety was key. They chose poison as their weapon, planning to serve it up in the emperor's evening meal. But when the poison failed to do the job swiftly, they resorted to more direct methods. Commodus, the once mighty gladiator, was strangled in his own palace by a wrestler named Narcissus, a fittingly tragic end for an emperor who had spent his life in the arena. With Commodus' death, the curtain fell on an era of spectacle and decay. The immediate aftermath was chaos, as Rome scrambled to find a successor who could stabilize the empire and mend the rifts that had widened under Commodus' rule. It was a power vacuum that could have sucked in the entire city if left unchecked. Though Commodus' reign was over, its echoes would haunt the empire for years to come. His death marked the end of the Nerva-Antonine dynasty, an era that had seen Rome reach peaks of prosperity and stability. Yet, it also served as a cautionary tale, a reminder that even the mightiest empire could falter when led by an emperor whose dreams of grandeur eclipsed the harsh realities of governance. The story of Commodus is as much a reflection of ancient Rome as it is of the man himself. It is a tale of ambition, excess, and the thin line between legend and reality. As we prepare to explore the aftermath of his reign in the next part, remember that history is not just a record of events, but a narrative of human folly and triumph, a reminder that the past, with all its lessons and legacies, is never truly behind us. Stay tuned as we continue to unravel the threads of Rome's imperial tapestry, one emperor at a time. As the dust settled on the chaotic New Year's Eve that saw Commodus exit stage, left in a most undignified manner, Rome found itself in the throes of a classic imperial crisis. The empire was like a ship adrift, its captain tossed overboard, with a mutinous crew eyeing the helm. The assassination of Commodus didn't just leave a vacancy, it left a gaping chasm where leadership should have been. Imagine the Senate as a group of beleaguered referees trying to enforce rules in a game where the players have all gone rogue. Now, the immediate impact of Commodus's demise wasn't exactly a parade of triumph. It was more akin to a scramble at a fire sale, where everyone was grabbing for power like it was the last loaf of bread in a famine. Enter Pertinax, a senator of stoic demeanor and practical sensibilities, who was promptly hailed as Rome's new emperor. It was January 1, 193 AD, talk about starting the year with a bang. Pertinax was the Senate's darling, a stabilizing figure meant to return Rome to its senses after Commodus's carnival of excess. But Pertinax's reign was as brief as it was promising. His attempts to curb the excesses of Commodus's administration were about as welcome as a toga at a nudist colony. The Praetorian Guard, Rome's elite bodyguards who were as loyal as a cat with a laser pointer, weren't thrilled with Pertinax's frugality. So, in a move that would make any Roman soap opera proud, they assassinated him after a mere 86 days in office. The empire was back to square one, and the throne was now up for grabs, literally. What followed was an auction for the imperial crown, a darkly comedic twist that saw the empire sold to the highest bidder. Enter Didius Julianus, who stepped up with a hefty bribe for the Praetorian Guard and found himself the proud, albeit short-lived, owner of Rome. His reign was a testament to the times, where power was a commodity and loyalty was as transient as a Roman sunset. It was a turbulent period, with more turnover than a bakery. Within a single year, Rome saw 5 different emperors, each one a stark reminder of the instability Commodus's reign had sown. Empire was like a colossal game of musical chairs, with each contender hoping to be seated when the music stopped, a tune that in this case was more of a war cry than a melody. Amid this chaos, the Senate's role was both pivotal and pitiful. They were the ultimate spectators, powerless yet crucial, watching as the empire's fate unfolded like a tragic play without an intermission. The political landscape was a quagmire, a test of endurance for any who dared to navigate it. So, what of Commodus's legacy, you ask? Well, that's where the story gets a bit murky, like a Roman bath after a particularly wild festival. On one hand, Commodus left behind an empire in disarray, a cautionary tale of what happens when spectacle overshadows governance. His reign was a textbook case of how not to rule, with his name forever etched in the annals of infamy. Yet the myth of Commodus persisted, a testament to Rome's love for larger-than-life characters. His gladiatorial escapades, although exaggerated, captured the imagination of a populace hungry for heroes. In a city that worshipped its past glories, Commodus was a living legend, a flawed Hercules, whose deeds in the arena overshadowed his failures in administration. The man and the myth of Commodus diverged like a Roman road splitting into two paths. As a ruler, he was a lesson in hubris, a reminder that even the mightiest empire could falter under the weight of its leaders' delusions. But as a figure of legend, he represented the eternal allure of spectacle, the seductive power of myth over reality. In the grand tapestry of history, Commodus is a vibrant thread, both a warning and a wonder. His reign, though disastrous, offers a modern perspective on leadership and legacy, a reminder that the line between reality and spectacle is as thin as the edge of a gladius. Commodus's story is a testament to the human condition, to our eternal struggle between ambition and humility. It's a tale that echoes through the ages, reminding us that power without purpose is like a chariot without a driver, wild, unpredictable, and ultimately destructive. As we reflect on the aftermath of his rule, it's clear that Commodus was both a product and a shaper of his time, a man who dared to dream of greatness, yet failed to grasp the responsibilities that came with it. His legacy, for better or worse, is a part of Rome's enduring story, a narrative that continues to captivate and caution us, offering lessons that are as relevant today as they were in ancient times. In the end, the story of Commodus is more than just a historical account. It's a mirror reflecting the complexities of leadership and the enduring power of myth. It's a reminder that, in the grand theater of history, the past is never truly behind us. It's constantly shaping the present, whispering its lessons to those willing to listen. And so, as we close this chapter on Commodus, we do so with a sense of both wonder and warning, knowing that his tale is but one part of the grand narrative that is Rome. When you think of the Mississippians, you might not immediately imagine a society bustling with activity akin to Times Square on a Friday night. Yet, that's precisely what many of their cities were, a hubbub of commerce, culture, and community. Stretching from around 800 CE to 1600 CE, these people were the architects of North America's first major urban centers, all without the help of modern conveniences like Wi-Fi or Google Maps. How did they do it? Buckle up for a ride back in time to when the only directions came from the sun and the stars. Let's start with the basics. Who were the Mississippians? These folks were a pre-Columbian civilization that thrived across what is now the southeastern United States. They didn't just survive, they thrived, spreading their influence from the Mississippi River all the way to the Great Lakes and the Gulf of Mexico. Their civilization was like a sprawling franchise of human ingenuity, spanning places today known as Illinois, Missouri, and Tennessee, among others. And at the heart of their empire was Cahokia, the ancient equivalent of a bustling metropolis, boasting a population that could rival that of any medieval European city at its peak. Cahokia, situated in present-day Illinois, was the Mississippian flagship store, if you will, with over 120 earthen mounds dotting its landscape. The largest of these mounds, Monk's Mound, stands as a testament to their engineering prowess. It's a massive four-terraced structure rising nearly 100 feet high. To put it in perspective, that's like stacking the Leaning Tower of Pisa on top of itself, and then some. It covers about 14 acres, which is more than enough space to host a couple of football fields. And yet, every ounce of soil was moved by hand. Imagine building something of that magnitude today without excavators or cranes. Makes you appreciate modern machinery, doesn't it? But why build these mounds at all? Were they just giant dirt piles to show off their muscle-building prowess? Not quite. These mounds likely served various purposes, from ceremonial sites to elite residences and observation points. In essence, they were multifunctional marvels long before open-floor plans were trendy. Picture a place where you could hold a political rally, throw a festival, and still have room for the chief's penthouse. Talk about utility. Now, you might wonder how a society could sustain such grandiose projects without the infrastructure we take for granted. The answer lies in their agricultural innovations. The Mississippians were masters of maize, cultivating vast fields that were the backbone of their diet and economy. Corn, beans, and squash were the staples, known as the Three Sisters of agriculture. Together, these crops formed a nutritional powerhouse that fueled their civilization. Think of it as the original power lunch, minus the kale smoothie. This agricultural prowess allowed the Mississippians to support large populations and develop complex social structures. It's worth noting that this wasn't some egalitarian utopia. Their society had its hierarchies, with elites likely living atop those impressive mounds, looking down, literally and possibly figuratively, on the common folk below. It's a classic tale of the haves and the have-nots, predating modern skyscrapers with penthouse suites. The sheer scale of Cahokia and other Mississippian sites prompts one of history's favorite questions. How did they manage trade and communication across such distances? While they didn't have the Pony Express, they did establish extensive trade networks. Artifacts from Cahokia have been found as far as the Great Lakes and the Gulf of Mexico, indicating a vibrant trade system. Imagine a time when getting your hands on exotic goods didn't involve a 2-day shipping promise, but rather a complex network of traders and bartering. The Mississippians' achievements are even more impressive considering the lack of written language. They left no Rosetta Stone to unlock their secrets. What we know comes from archaeological discoveries and accounts from European explorers who encountered their descendants. It's a puzzle pieced together from shards of pottery, remnants of structures, and the enduring legacy of their mound building. And while they may not have penned their stories, the Mississippians left a lasting impact on the landscape and the peoples who followed. Their innovations set the stage for the later cultures that European settlers would encounter. They were the unsung architects of a pre-Columbian world, building a network of societies that thrived long before anyone thought to cross the Atlantic in search of new world riches. So, as we embark on this journey through the world of the Mississippians, let's remember that history isn't just about memorizing dates and names. It's about understanding the ingenuity and resilience of people who lived in a world vastly different from ours, yet faced challenges that resonate with the present. The Mississippians may not have had the internet, but they were connected in ways that were, for their time, equally revolutionary. And they did it all with nothing more than the land beneath their feet and the will to shape it into something extraordinary. So let's dive into the social mechanics of the Mississippians, where the hierarchy was as complex as a teenager's social life on Instagram. At the top of this ancient social pyramid sat the chiefs, who were essentially the rock stars of the pre-Columbian world. These guys weren't just figureheads with fancy headgear. They were the movers and shakers, the decision-makers who could make or break a civilization. Think of them as the Elon Musks of their time, minus the Twitter antics, but with an equally ambitious vision for their communities. The chiefs wielded power that was both political and spiritual. They weren't just running the show. They were believed to have divine connections, acting as intermediaries between the gods and the people. Imagine having a CEO who could also claim to have a hotline to heaven. This divine authority wasn't just for show, either. It played a crucial role in maintaining social order. When your leader is seen as having friends in high places, literally, it tends to keep the dissenters in check. But what about the folks who weren't born into a life of mound-top luxury? The commoners of the Mississippian society were the backbone of the civilization, the unsung heroes who made sure everything from agriculture to construction went smoothly. These were the people who, quite literally, built the world around them, one basket of dirt at a time. They were the ones who grew the food, built the houses, and crafted the tools that kept the wheels of society turning. Picture a dedicated workforce, working tirelessly without the promise of a weekend binge-watch session as a reward. Now, let's bust a myth. Life for the common Mississippian wasn't all about endless toil under the blazing sun. Sure, there was hard work involved, but evidence suggests that these communities had a surprising amount of social mobility. While there were definitely elites and commoners, the lines weren't etched in stone. Some individuals could rise through the ranks thanks to their skills or alliances, proving that even in ancient times, talent and networking could open doors. It's like the original LinkedIn, no internet required. Warfare, too, played a fascinating role in this social structure. It wasn't just about land grabs or resource raids. It was a way to prove one's mettle and secure status. Victorious warriors often found themselves catapulting up the social ladder, earning prestige and possibly a cozy spot closer to the chief's inner circle. But let's not romanticize it too much. War was brutal and bloody, a far cry from the glorified tales of heroism. It was a harsh reality where surviving a battle was as much about luck as it was about skill. Gender roles in Mississippian society were another area where reality might surprise you. Women weren't just relegated to the sidelines. They played significant roles that went beyond the domestic sphere. While men were off playing war games, women were managing agriculture, crafting goods, and even participating in trade. They were the original multitaskers, balancing the demands of family and community life with deft efficiency. This wasn't just a culture of male dominance. It was a complex tapestry where both genders contributed to the society's success. And speaking of contributions, let's talk about the spiritual and ceremonial aspects that held the Mississippians together. These weren't simply quaint traditions to pass the time. Rituals and ceremonies were vital for reinforcing social bonds and ensuring the continuity of their cultural identity. From elaborate dances to intricate ceremonies, these events were more than just opportunities to don feathered headdresses. They were the social glue that kept the community cohesive, a way to reaffirm their beliefs and strengthen their ties. Of course, all these social dynamics were underpinned by an economy that thrived on agriculture and trade. The Mississippians had a well-oiled system that ensured food was plentiful and goods were exchanged efficiently. Their economy wasn't just about survival. It was about thriving, building the kind of wealth that allowed for leisure, creativity, and innovation. This economic prosperity was a key factor in their ability to build monumental structures and support a large population, a feat that still boggles the mind considering the lack of modern technology. As we continue exploring the layers of Mississippian society, it's clear that their world was as vibrant and intricate as the patterns on their pottery. Their achievements serve as a reminder that human ingenuity has always found a way to flourish, even in the most challenging of circumstances. And as we peel back the layers of history, we not only learn about the past, but also gain insights into the timeless dance of power, society, and survival that continues to shape our world today. Now, let's turn our spotlight on the Mississippian economy, the heartbeat of their society, pulsing with trade routes and craftsmanship that would make even the savviest modern entrepreneurs sit up and take notes. Forget the NASDAQ. These folks were all about the maize, trade, and craftsmanship. Let's dive into how they orchestrated complex trade networks across vast distances without so much as a compass app. Eat your heart out, Magellan. First, let's talk maize. Corn wasn't just a side dish on the Mississippian menu. It was literally the bread and butter of their economy. This wasn't just any cornfield either. We're talking about sprawling agricultural operations that could rival today's corporate farms. Imagine acres upon acres of golden maize stretching as far as the eye can see, a veritable sea of sustenance that fed the masses and fueled trade. Corn was the currency of the Mississippian world, and they were the original corn barons, investing in the soil to reap the rewards of a bountiful harvest. This wasn't just subsistence farming, it was an economic engine driving a civilization. But how did they get their corn, and other goods, into the hands of far-flung trading partners? The answer lies in an intricate web of trade networks that would make even the most seasoned logistics manager break into a sweat. The Mississippians were masterful traders, swapping goods over distances that span the length of the eastern United States. While the Silk Road was busy connecting Asia with Europe, the Mississippians were forging their own paths through rivers, trails, and the occasional backwoods shortcut, all without the luxury of GPS. Their trade routes extended from the Great Lakes to the Gulf of Mexico, with goods moving in every direction like a pre-Columbian Amazon prime, sans the delivery drones. Artifacts like pottery, copper, and shell beads have been unearthed across these regions, each piece a testament to the vast network that connected different tribes and cultures. These items weren't just trinkets for the mantelpiece, they were the commodities that oiled the gears of their economy. Pottery wasn't just about function, it was a canvas for cultural expression, with designs that told stories and reflected social identities. The significance of shell beads was akin to currency, facilitating trade and symbolizing wealth and status. Speaking of craftsmanship, the Mississippians were no slouches when it came to creating goods that were both functional and beautiful. Their pottery was more than just clay and fire. It was an art form, showcasing intricate designs that rivaled anything you'd find in a modern art gallery. These weren't just pots to hold water, they were storytelling vessels, each piece a narrative of the world around them. And let's not forget about their shell beads, which were as much a status symbol as they were a trading staple. These beads traveled far and wide, a testament to their value and the craftsmanship behind them. In a world without cash registers or credit cards, bartering was the name of the game. The Mississippians were the ultimate barterers, a people who understood the true value of negotiation long before Wall Street brokers made it trendy. Their ability to trade and exchange goods was rooted in an understanding of mutual benefit, a concept as old as humanity itself. It wasn't just about getting the best deal. It was about building relationships and alliances, fostering connections that would ensure prosperity and stability. So, what do these trade practices tell us about Mississippian values and priorities? For one, they highlight a society that valued community and collaboration over individual gain. Their economic system was built on a foundation of cooperation, with trade serving as a bridge that connected diverse peoples and cultures. This wasn't just about amassing wealth. It was about sustaining a way of life that thrived on interconnectedness. Another key takeaway is the Mississippians' remarkable adaptability. They were a society that could pivot and innovate, leveraging their agricultural and crafting skills to meet the challenges of their environment. This adaptability was crucial to their survival and success, proving that sometimes the best business strategy is simply to roll with the punches and make the most of what you've got. Of course, it wasn't all smooth sailing. The Mississippians faced their share of economic challenges, from crop failures to resource scarcity. But rather than collapse under the weight of adversity, they found ways to persevere. Their resilience in the face of hardship is a testament to their ingenuity and determination, qualities that continue to resonate in today's world. In many ways, the Mississippian economy was a reflection of their society as a whole, dynamic, complex, and deeply interconnected. They were a people who understood the power of community and collaboration, building a world where trade wasn't just an economic necessity, but a vital part of their cultural fabric. As we continue our journey through the world of the Mississippians, it's clear that their legacy is one of innovation and resilience. They were a civilization that thrived in the face of challenges, building a society that was as rich in culture as it was in commerce. And while their world may have been vastly different from ours, the lessons they left behind are timeless reminders of the enduring power of human ingenuity. Stay tuned as we delve deeper into the Mississippians' social and cultural landscape, exploring the beliefs and traditions that shaped their world. We've only scratched the surface of this fascinating civilization, and there's so much more to discover. So, grab your metaphorical shovels and prepare to dig deeper into the layers of history that continue to shape our present. As we continue unearthing the spiritual life of the Mississippians, let's dive into the heart of their beliefs, a world brimming with gods, spirits, and mythical beasts, where the lines between the natural and supernatural were as blurred as a teenager's logic on curfew night. While we might picture these folks as tree-hugging harmony seekers, the truth is far more layered. Their spirituality wasn't just about connecting with nature. It was a complex web of ideologies that governed their society and justified their political machinations. Think of it as the ancient equivalent of divine right, only with more serpents and fewer crowns. First off, let's talk about their pantheon. This wasn't a simple lineup of deities lounging on clouds. It was more like a cosmic soap opera with players like the Earth Mother and the Great Serpent. The Earth Mother wasn't just a nurturing figure. She was the giver of life, the ultimate mother-in-law of the cosmos, overseeing fertility and agriculture. Her presence in Mississippian society was as pervasive as corn in their diet. She wasn't just revered, she was essential, worshipped through rituals that ensured bountiful harvests, and by extension, societal stability. Now, enter the Great Serpent, a creature that would give any modern horror flick a run for its money. This wasn't just a snake on steroids. It was a powerful symbol of transformation and chaos. Picture it slithering through their mythology, embodying both danger and renewal. The serpent was a reminder that life cycles were as unpredictable as a game of ancient Monopoly. Its image, adorned everything from pottery to ceremonial stones, a constant presence in their spiritual landscape, whispering promises of power and destruction. These beliefs weren't just quaint tales to scare the kids. They were the backbone of Mississippian society. Rituals and ceremonies were the glue that held their world together, providing cohesion in a society as complex as a modern tax code. Festivals weren't just excuses to throw on some feathers and dance under the moonlight. They were orchestrated events that reinforced social hierarchies and justified political decisions. Picture the chiefs standing atop those massive mounds, not just as leaders, but as spiritual intermediaries. They wielded religion like a seasoned PR expert, using divine authority to validate their rule and keep any potential challengers in check. The Mississippians were masters of using spirituality to shape politics. When your leader is seen as a divine figure, it's a bit tricky to argue with his decisions, isn't it? They wrapped their political ambitions in spiritual garb, ensuring that every edict had the weight of the cosmos behind it. This wasn't just about maintaining order. It was about weaving a narrative that kept the society ticking like a well-oiled machine, minus the oil, of course. It's a tale as old as time. Power is best wielded when it's perceived as divinely ordained. But let's not sugarcoat it. This spiritual political cocktail wasn't just about unity and peace. It was also a tool for control, a way to manage the masses and maintain the status quo. The chiefs and elites were adept at using religious ceremonies to reinforce their positions, often claiming that their decrees came with a celestial stamp of approval. Imagine a world where your every move was watched, not just by nosy neighbors, but by the gods themselves. It's enough to make anyone think twice before stepping out of line. This brings us to the communal aspect of Mississippian spirituality. These rituals weren't solo affairs. They were community-wide events that involved everyone from the youngest child to the eldest elder. Picture entire villages gathering for ceremonies that lasted days, complete with feasting, dancing, and enough pageantry to make a modern music festival look like a backyard barbecue. These gatherings were about more than just spiritual renewal. They were social events that reinforced bonds and provided a sense of belonging. In a world without Facebook, this was how you stayed connected, through shared faith and collective experiences. Let's debunk another myth while we're at it. The idea that Mississippian spirituality was all about peace and love. Sure, there was a reverence for nature, but their beliefs also included elements of conflict and conquest. Warfare was often tied to religious practices, with battles sometimes seen as divinely sanctioned. Warriors weren't just fighters. They were spiritual champions, their victories celebrated as proof of divine favor. This wasn't a society of pacifists singing "Kumbaya" around a campfire. It was a world where religion and warfare were intertwined, each feeding into the other in a cycle as relentless as the seasons. And speaking of cycles, let's not forget the role of death in Mississippian spiritual life. Funerary practices were elaborate affairs, reflecting beliefs about the afterlife that were as complex as a conspiracy theorist's flowchart. Burial mounds weren't just graves, they were gateways to another world, carefully constructed to ensure safe passage for the soul. The dead were interred with goods meant for the afterlife, a testament to the belief that life continued beyond the veil. These rites weren't just about honoring the deceased, they were about maintaining cosmic balance, ensuring that the cycle of life, death, and rebirth continued without a hitch. So, as we peel back the layers of Mississippian spirituality, it's clear that their beliefs were as intricate and interwoven as the patterns on their pottery. This wasn't just a society of nature worshippers. It was a civilization that used religion as a tool for cohesion, control, and continuity. Their spiritual life was a reflection of their social structure, each reinforcing the other in a dance as old as time itself. As we continue our journey through the world of the Mississippians, keep in mind that we've only scratched the surface of their spiritual landscape. There's much more to discover about how their beliefs shaped their world, influencing everything from politics to daily life. So, stay tuned as we delve deeper into the mysteries of this fascinating civilization, uncovering the truths that lie beneath the mounds and myths. The Mississippians, much like a spectacular fireworks display, reached dazzling heights only to eventually fizzle into history. Their decline is a story shrouded in mystery, with theories as plentiful as a conspiracy theorist's whiteboard. Let's dig into these theories, ranging from the wrath of Mother Nature to the inevitable clash with European newcomers, and see what we can unearth. First up, climate change. Now, before you imagine the Mississippians fretting over melting ice caps, let's set the scene. Around the 13th century, North America was hit with what scholars call the Little Ice Age. This wasn't a deep freeze that turned the land into an Arctic wasteland, but it did mean colder temperatures and a shorter growing season. For a society that relied on agriculture like a modern teenager relies on Wi-Fi, this was a big deal. The three sisters, corn, beans, and squash, were less cooperative under these conditions, leading to food shortages and, subsequently, a decline in population. It's a classic case of Mother Nature reminding humanity who's really in charge. But it wasn't just the crops that were feeling frosty. The changing climate likely sparked social tensions. Imagine trying to hold a community together when everyone's hangry because their corn rations are shrinking. Social unrest could have been as common as the morning roosters crow, with people looking to their leaders for solutions, or scapegoats. When the going gets tough, societies sometimes get going in different directions, potentially leading to the fragmentation of what was once a cohesive civilization. Next, we have the wild card, European contact. While the Mississippians were already on a downward trajectory by the time Europeans arrived, the newcomers certainly didn't help matters. Picture this: Hernando de Soto and his band of merry conquistadors traipsing through the southeast in the 1540, looking for gold and glory. What they found instead were Mississippian societies already grappling with their own issues. De Soto's expedition was like an unwelcome guest at a party that was already winding down, and they didn't even bring a gift. The European arrival brought diseases that spread faster than gossip in a small town. Smallpox, measles, and influenza were like invisible invaders, wiping out large swaths of the population who had no immunity against these new illnesses. Estimates suggest that disease could have reduced indigenous populations by as much as 90% in some areas. It's the kind of statistic that makes you shiver in your boots and realize that sometimes the greatest threats come not from swords, but from sneezes. The introduction of European goods and technologies also disrupted traditional ways of life. Iron tools and weapons, for instance, were game changers, but they also upset the social balance. Suddenly, the old ways of crafting and trading were upended, and those who adapted to these new tools gained power and influence, while others were left in the dust. It's a familiar tale of technological upheaval, proving that even in ancient times, innovation could be as much a curse as a blessing. But let's not pin all the blame on climate and Europeans. Internal factors were at play, too. The Mississippian political structure, with its elite ruling class perched atop earthen mounds, was vulnerable to shifts in power dynamics. As resources dwindled, these leaders may have found it increasingly difficult to maintain their divine right to rule. Without the corn to feed their people or the trade goods to satisfy their allies, the social fabric could have unraveled faster than a poorly knitted sweater. Archaeological evidence suggests that warfare became more prevalent during this period. Fortified villages and evidence of violent conflict indicate that as resources became scarce, tensions boiled over. Warfare was both a symptom and a cause of decline, compounding the challenges faced by these societies. It's a grim reminder that when resources are tight, humanity's darker instincts can take center stage. So, what's the takeaway from all this? The decline of the Mississippians is a cautionary tale about the delicate balance between human societies and their environments. It reminds us that no civilization is immune to the whims of nature, the impact of external forces, or the internal strife that can arise when times get tough. And yet, even in their decline, the Mississippians left a legacy that continues to resonate. Their influence can be seen in the cultures that followed, from the tribes that emerged in their wake to the European settlers who later came to dominate the continent. The mound-building tradition, for instance, persisted among various groups well into the historical period, a testament to the enduring cultural significance of these structures. Their agricultural practices, particularly the cultivation of corn, laid the groundwork for the agricultural economies that would later develop across North America. In modern times, the story of the Mississippians offers lessons about sustainability and resilience. It prompts us to consider how we manage our resources and respond to environmental challenges. As we grapple with our own era's climate shifts and technological disruptions, the Mississippians serve as a reminder that adaptation is key to survival. Moreover, their story challenges us to rethink our narratives about pre-Columbian societies. The Mississippians weren't just a footnote in history. They were a vibrant civilization that achieved remarkable feats of engineering, agriculture, and social organization. Their legacy is woven into the fabric of American history, a testament to the ingenuity and adaptability of human societies. As we conclude our journey through the world of the Mississippians, it's clear that their story is far from ancient. It's a living narrative that continues to shape our understanding of the past and inform our present. So, the next time you pass by a mound or see corn growing in a field, take a moment to remember the people who once thrived on this land, transforming it into a landscape of innovation and community. Their echoes are all around us, whispering reminders of the power of human resilience and the enduring quest for connection and meaning. Sitting high atop the Andes, like a king on a very, very big mountain of gold, the Sparta Inca wasn't just running a kingdom. He was orchestrating a high-stakes game of Sim City. Except this wasn't just a game, and the stakes were 10 million real lives. This guy was the big cheese, the top banana, the CEO of an empire that spanned 500 miles, roughly the distance from L.A. to Chicago, if your GPS was set to epic. We're talking about the kind of top dog status where you could wear a sun mask to work and nobody would blink an eye. Why? Because you were literally considered the descendant of the sun god. Beat that, corporate America. Now, when it comes to the Inca social structure, it's all about the pyramid scheme, but not the kind your cousin tries to rope you into. This was a bona fide hierarchy, built with the precision of an IKEA manual, but with stones, and without the need for Allen wrenches. At the summit, we have the Sparta Inca, whose word was law and whose hobbies probably included ruling with divine authority and owning more llamas than you. Below him were the high-ranking nobles, or Inca by blood, essentially the royal family and their inner circle. Think of them as the board of directors with slightly more impressive headgear. These Inca by blood weren't just any nobles. They were the empire's VIPs, often tasked with governing vast swaths of territory. They enjoyed the perks of power without the pesky burden of accountability that might come with, say, a democratic process. They were the ones who got to wear the fanciest tunics and sip the finest chicha, the Inca equivalent of a high-end craft brew. But let's not get too misty-eyed here. These were the folks making sure the empire's gears ran smoothly, and that sometimes meant playing hardball with the workforce. Speaking of the workforce, let's talk about the unsung heroes of the empire, the commoners. These were the people who kept the whole show on the road, literally and figuratively. They were the builders, farmers, and craftsmen, the ones who made sure that when the Sparta Inca fancied a new city, it popped up like a particularly impressive Lego set. And while they didn't get the glory, they did get something called the mira, a kind of labor tax that was less about cutting a check and more about donating your weekends and weekdays and holidays to the state. The mira was the empire's secret sauce, making sure roads were built, temples erected, and that the empire didn't fall apart like a badly assembled IKEA wardrobe. Everyone had to pitch in, from the lowliest farmer to the most skilled artisan. It wasn't just about keeping busy. It was about maintaining a civilization that sprawled across harsh terrains and varying climates. The Inca managed to keep this vast empire ticking with a kind of efficiency that would make a Swiss watchmaker weep with envy. If you're thinking this sounds a bit like a historical version of the gig economy, you'd be right, minus the apps and surge pricing. But instead of delivering pizzas, these folks were delivering the infrastructure of an empire. And here's the kicker. It actually worked. This system allowed the Inca to expand their influence and keep control over a vast area without the benefit of the wheel or a written language. Talk about a logistical nightmare. Yet they pulled it off with the kind of meticulous organization that would make any modern project manager green with envy. Now, let's not sugarcoat it. While there's a romantic notion about working for the collective good, reality wasn't all sunshine and rainbows, and certainly not for those laboring in the fields or hauling stones up mountains. There were no sick days, no tow, and definitely no casual Fridays. It was a demanding life, and the pressure to meet the state's needs could be crushing. Yet, it was this very system that allowed the Inca to build an empire that could rival Rome in its heyday, all without the benefit of Twitter or a public relations department to spin the narrative. Ultimately, the Inca social structure was a finely tuned machine, a blend of hierarchy and community that held together an empire in one of the most challenging environments on Earth. It was a society where everyone had a role, and every role was crucial to the whole. From the divine ruler at the top to the humble farmer breaking ground, each played a part in this grand tapestry. And while the Sapa Inca might have been the face of the empire, it was the collective efforts of its people that kept the entire operation from toppling like a precariously stacked cairn. So next time you're stuck in traffic, just remember, at least no one's asking you to build a temple in your spare time. As the Inca Empire hummed along like a well-oiled, llama-driven machine, it was the commoners who kept the wheels turning. These weren't just any laborers. They were agricultural maestros. Imagine terraced farms carved into the steep Andean mountainsides, a feat that would make modern urban farmers cry into their hydroponic kale. The Inca were turning inhospitable slopes into prime farmland, and they didn't even need motivational TED talks to do it. These terraces weren't just for show. They were the empire's breadbasket, except the bread was more like a mash of corn, potatoes, and quinoa. And here's the kicker. These staples weren't merely trendy superfoods for health nuts. They were the backbone of a diet that fueled an empire. The Inca cultivated over 3,000 varieties of potatoes alone, a fact that would make your local farmer's market blush. Potatoes became the culinary Swiss Army knife of the Andes, versatile and vital, providing the necessary calories to keep the empire's workforce from collapsing in a heap of exhaustion. And let's not forget corn, the crop that's been rebranded in modern times as the villain in a high-fructose world. Back then, it was a powerhouse, providing sustenance and the all-important chicha, a fermented beverage that might not win any craft beer awards today, but hey, it got the job done. Quinoa, that darling of today's health-conscious crowd, was another staple. The Inca didn't need Instagrammers to advertise its benefits. It just knew it grew well in the harsh Andean climate and kept the empire's collective belly full. Now, while the ideal of communal living might conjure up images of harmony and kumbaya moments, the reality was a bit more, shall we say, pragmatic. Enter the Ailu system, the social and economic network that organized daily life. It wasn't so much a utopian commune as it was a highly organized, obligation-driven machine. Think of it as the original HOA, but instead of getting a sternly worded letter about your lawn, you might be summoned to haul stones or plant crops. Each Ailu was a kinship group, a bit like your extended family, but on steroids, responsible for managing land, labor, and resources within their territory. This wasn't just about picking up after your neighbors. It was about survival. The Ailu provided a safety net, ensuring members had access to land to cultivate. But don't get too misty-eyed over the thought of people singing songs as they worked together. This was no weekend volunteer gig. Everyone had roles and responsibilities, and you were expected to pull your weight. The Ailu system was about obligation rather than choice. In return for access to resources, commoners owed labor to the state, much like the Mida system, but on a more localized scale. This wasn't the kind of communal living where you could just opt out because you were not feeling it. It was more like, hey, we're all in this together, whether we like it or not, scenario. The Ailu was the backbone of the empire's agricultural prowess, but it also kept everyone in line, ensuring the fields were plowed and the terraces maintained. It's easy to romanticize this structure as an idyllic form of socialism, but the truth is it was a necessity dictated by the harsh Andean environment. The Inca needed everyone to chip in, not just because it was nice, but because it was essential for survival. And while this system ensured that no one starved, it didn't leave much room for personal freedoms as we think of them today. Your role was defined by birth, and stepping out of line wasn't an option unless you fancied a chat with the local authorities. In a world without money, this exchange of labor for resources was the Incas' answer to the economic conundrum. It was a system where personal ambition took a backseat to collective survival. While it might sound stifling, it's what allowed the Inca to thrive in an environment that would send most of us running for the nearest air-conditioned office. They created a sustainable model that kept the empire's heart beating, even if it meant sacrificing a bit of personal agency along the way. So, while the Ailu system might not have been the cozy community gathering some might dream of, it was the linchpin of the Incas' agricultural success. It was a practical solution to a very real problem, ensuring that the empire's fields stayed fertile and its granaries full. The Inca commoners, with their terraced farms and communal obligations, were the unsung heroes of the empire, keeping the whole shebang from crumbling into the Andean dust. Their daily grind was less about individual aspirations and more about ensuring the empire's survival, a sacrifice that, in its own way, deserves a standing ovation, llama included. But let's not get too caught up in the noble self-sacrifice of the Inca commoners. It's time to take a peek behind the velvet curtain of the Inca elite. If there was ever a group that knew how to turn the Andes into their personal playground, it was the Inca nobility. These folks had the kind of lives that would make today's social media influencers green with envy, minus the ring lights and sponsored posts. We're talking about a bunch whose daily grind involved sipping on the finest chicha while overseeing vast tracts of land, rather than hustling for likes. These aristocrats weren't just strutting around in their fancy togas for show. They were the empire's nerve center. Their roles as administrators, priests, and generals were as vital as they were glamorous. Think of them as the original multitaskers, juggling roles like a circus performer on a unicycle. These nobles were the empire's bigwigs, expected to keep the administrative machine ticking over like a Swiss watch. Except this watch was powered by people, not gears. And where did these nobles hang their feathered hats? None other than Cusco, the empire's beating heart. A city so well-engineered it would make modern urban planners weep into their blueprints. Cusco wasn't just any city. It was the epicenter of power, a place where the Inca elite built their lives, quite literally, on the backs of their subjects. With prime real estate that rivaled anything you'd find in a glossy travel mag, these nobles had it made. Imagine living in a sprawling stone palace with views that could make even the most jaded traveler gasp. But before we get too misty-eyed over this seemingly golden lifestyle, let's bust some myths. Sure, the Inca nobility had perks aplenty, but they also lived under the constant pressure of staying in the emperor's good graces. One misstep, and they could find themselves on the outs faster than you can say, awkward family dinner. The Sapa Inca wasn't just a figurehead. His word was law, and crossing him was a gamble that could cost you everything, including that cushy palace view. Women in the noble circles were another force to be reckoned with, wielding power in ways that often flew under the radar. They weren't just sitting pretty in their finery. They played crucial roles in maintaining the empire's power dynamics. These women were the glue holding the social fabric together, often acting as diplomats, managing estates, and ensuring that alliances were as strong as the empire's stonework. So while the men might have been the ones leading armies or conducting rituals, it was the women who ensured that the political chessboard remained firmly in the emperor's favor. Despite the allure of opulence, life as an Inca noble wasn't all sunshine and garden parties. They had to navigate a complex web of responsibilities, from administering justice to managing agricultural production, a task that, in an empire reliant on its agrarian backbone, was no small potatoes. And let's not forget the religious duties. These weren't just ceremonial fluff, but integral to maintaining the empire's divine favor. Priests among the nobility held sway over rituals that were believed to keep the sun rising and the crops growing, a role that could make or break their standing. Now, you might think that with all these responsibilities, the Inca nobles would have a rock-solid position, but you'd be wrong. The emperor's favor was as fickle as the Andean weather, and staying in his good books was a constant balancing act. Fail to meet expectations, and you could find yourself out of favor faster than you can say human sacrifice. In an empire where the sun god's approval was paramount, maintaining your standing was as precarious as walking a tightrope across a gaping canyon. The reality of being an Inca noble was a far cry from the myth of endless riches and leisure. Sure, they had access to gold and silver, but these metals were more about political symbolism than personal wealth. Gold was used to honor the gods and decorate temples, not to line the pockets of the elite. So while the nobles might have looked like they were living large, their lives were more about public service and less about personal gain. In conclusion, the Inca nobility were the empire's movers and shakers, but their lives were anything but carefree. They navigated a world where power was both a privilege and a burden, with responsibilities that went far beyond the glossy facade. They were the empire's administrators, priests, and generals, juggling roles with the precision of a master juggler. And while their lives may have looked Instagrammable from a distance, up close, it was a high-stakes game of survival, where one false move could see them tumble from grace faster than an errant stone down an Andean slope. Stay tuned, because the story of the Inca isn't over yet. There's more to uncover about this empire's intricate social fabric, more myths to bust, more realities to unveil, and more stories to tell. We're just getting started on this journey through the Inca's remarkable world. Now, just when you thought the Inca nobility had enough on their gold-plated plates, let's dive into a topic that adds a whole new layer to their already complex world: religion. But wait, before you start picturing serene temples and peaceful meditations, let's clear up a few things. Forget everything you know about calm spirituality. In the Inca Empire, religion was less about finding inner peace and more about making sure the crops didn't fail and the sun didn't take an unscheduled day off. At the heart of this religious juggernaut was the Sapa Inca himself, who wasn't just a ruler wearing a snazzy hat, but was believed to be the living descendant of Inta, the sun god. Picture this: a ruler who was both a king and a deity, an ancient multitasker who had to balance governance with divine duties. In today's terms, imagine a world leader who is also a YouTube star, expected to perform feats that ensure the safety and prosperity of their nation. Move over, social media influencers with your viral challenges. The Sapa Inca was setting the bar incredibly high. Now, the rituals and ceremonies conducted by the Sapa Inca weren't mere pageantry. They were high-stakes performances. Archaeological evidence suggests these events involved elaborate processions, offerings, and sometimes even sacrifices, all designed to keep the gods happy and the empire thriving. Nothing like a bit of divine pressure to keep you on your toes. Historical accounts describe rituals at sites like Machu Picchu and the Coricancha Temple in Cuzco, where gold-lined walls gleamed with the sun's reflection, a literal spotlight on the emperor's divine duties. But let's not get too swept up in the glitz and glam of it all. There's a gritty underside to this divine gig. The Sapa Inca's religious role was as much about political control as it was about spiritual guidance. Religion was the glue that held the empire together, a tool to unify the diverse peoples under Inca rule. By positioning himself as a guard king, the Sapa Inca wasn't just ensuring good harvests. He was consolidating his power, reinforcing the social hierarchy, and keeping potential dissenters in check. After all, who would dare question a ruler who could claim celestial endorsement? This intertwining of religion and politics wasn't just a unique Inca invention. It echoes through the corridors of power across history, from the divine right of kings in Europe to modern leaders who use religious rhetoric to bolster their authority. The Inca were masters at this game, wielding religion with the same precision that a modern-day politician might wield a Twitter account. One of the most striking aspects of Inca religious practice was the use of human sacrifice, a topic that has fueled many a myth and misconception. While it's true that sacrifices were made, they were less frequent and less bloody than popular culture might have you believe. The famous Capacacha ceremonies, for instance, involved the sacrifice of children, chosen for their purity, to appease the gods during times of crisis or to commemorate significant events. This wasn't done with the nonchalance of a backyard barbecue. It was a Sama, sacred act, imbued with the weight of divine necessity. Recent archaeological finds, such as those at the peak of Mount Lulelaco, have revealed the preserved remains of these young sacrifices, offering haunting insights into this grim aspect of Inca spirituality. But let's zoom out for a moment and consider the bigger picture. While the notion of human sacrifice might send shivers down the modern spine, it's essential to understand the economic and social pressures that drove such practices. The Inca Empire was vast, stretching over 770,000 square miles, and maintaining control over this sprawling territory required more than just military might. Religion provided a framework for unity, a shared belief system that helped bind the empire's many regions into a cohesive whole. It was a way of ensuring loyalty and compliance, a reminder that the Sapa Inca's authority was divine and unquestionable. In many ways, Religion was the Incas' version of state propaganda. It reinforced societal roles, solidified the power of the elite, and kept the empire humming along. While the spiritual elements were certainly present, the practical applications of these beliefs were paramount. The Inca were pragmatic in their piety, using religion as a tool for governance and control. And let's not forget the priests, the unsung managers of the divine department. These guys were the intermediaries between the gods and the people, responsible for interpreting omens, conducting rituals, and ensuring that the empire remained in the sun god's good graces. They wielded considerable influence, acting as advisors to the Sparta Inca and playing a crucial role in maintaining the empire's religious and political stability. Think of them as the ancient equivalent of policy advisors, but with more feathered headdresses and fewer PowerPoint presentations. As we dissect the layers of Inca religion, it becomes clear that the line between the sacred and the political was as blurred as a poorly executed charcoal sketch. The religious practices of the Inca were not just about honoring the gods. They were about maintaining the status quo, ensuring order, and reinforcing the social hierarchy. It was a system that worked remarkably well, keeping the empire stable and unified for nearly a century, until the Spanish arrived with their own divine mission. And while it's easy to romanticize the Inca as a deeply spiritual people communing with nature under the Andean sun, the reality is far more complex. Their religion was a sophisticated blend of faith and politics, a testament to the ingenuity of a society that thrived in one of the world's most challenging environments. The Sparta Inca might have been a divine ruler, but he was also a shrewd politician, using his celestial credentials to build an empire that left a lasting legacy on the world stage. Stay tuned, because there's more to unravel in this epic tale of ambition, spirituality, and power. The Inca story is far from over, and as we continue this journey, we'll delve deeper into the intricacies of their society, uncovering truths that are as astonishing as they are enlightening. And just when the Inca story was reaching peak complexity, the Spanish arrived in the early 16th century, bringing with them a whole new level of disruption. Imagine a world where your meticulously orchestrated empire is like a finely tuned orchestra, and then some guy with a trumpet suddenly decides to play jazz in the middle of your symphony. That's pretty much what happened when Francisco Pizarro and his conquistadors showed up, armed with steel, gunpowder, and a ravenous appetite for gold. The Spanish conquest was less of a polite handshake and more of a seismic upheaval that makes today's political scandals seem as trivial as a minor traffic violation. We're talking about a cultural collision that hit the Inca social structure like a wrecking ball, shattering the intricate hierarchy and leaving chaos in its wake. The Spaniards were on a mission, driven by the triple motives of gold, guard, and glory, an unholy trinity that spelled disaster for the Inca way of life. Let's break it down. In 1532, Pizarro's small force of about 168 men confronted the Inca army, which numbered in the tens of thousands. But here's the kicker. Despite the odds, the Spaniards managed to capture the Inca emperor, Atahualpa, in the Battle of Cajamarca. This was no David and Goliath story. It was more like a game of chess where one player is using a flamethrower. The capture of Atahualpa was a masterstroke, akin to snatching the king off the board and declaring yourself the winner of the game. Atahualpa, who just emerged victorious in a civil war against his half-brother Huascar, suddenly found himself at the mercy of these armor-clad strangers. Desperate to save his skin, he offered a ransom that would make even the most extravagant lottery jackpot look like pocket change. A room filled with gold as high as he could reach, and twice as much silver. We're talking roughly 24 tons of precious metal, enough to fund an entire season of Game of Thrones. But spoiler alert, the gold wasn't enough to save him. Atahualpa was executed in 1533, marking the beginning of the end for the Inca Empire. It was as if someone had yanked the keystone from an arch, causing the entire structure to come crashing down. Without their Sparta Inca, the divine ruler who held the universe together, the Inca world began to unravel at an alarming pace. In the aftermath, the Spanish began to dismantle the Inca social machine with the kind of ruthless efficiency that would make a modern demolition crew proud. They imposed their own systems of governance, replacing the mita with the encomienda, a labor system that turned the indigenous people into virtual slaves. Gone were the days of communal obligation. Instead, the Spaniards demanded tribute in the form of labor and resources, with little regard for the cultural and societal structures that had sustained the Inca for centuries. The Spanish conquest wasn't just a physical domination, it was a cultural and psychological one. The Spaniards brought with them not only guns and germs, but also a new religion. Christianity was forcibly spread, and the Incas' temples were repurposed or destroyed, their deities dismissed as pagan idols. It was like a hostile takeover of the spiritual realm, where the old gods were swiftly replaced by the new. But here's where things get interesting. Despite the overwhelming force of the Spanish onslaught, the Inca didn't just roll over and accept their fate. They adapted, resisted, and in some cases, even thrived within this new world order. The remnants of the Inca elite became adept at navigating the Spanish political system, leveraging their knowledge of the land and its people to maintain some semblance of power. They became intermediaries between the colonial rulers and the indigenous population, a role that was both precarious and pivotal. The resilience of the Inca people is a testament to their ingenuity and adaptability. They managed to preserve elements of their culture, language, and traditions despite the oppressive weight of colonial rule. It's a reminder that while empires can fall, the spirit of a people can endure, finding new ways to express itself in the face of adversity. So, what does the fall of the Inca Empire teach us? For starters, it highlights the dangers of over-centralizing power in one charismatic leader. The Incas' reliance on the Sapa Inca as the linchpin of their society meant that when he was removed, the entire system crumbled. It's a cautionary tale about the perils of putting all your political eggs in one basket, a lesson as relevant today as it was back then. Moreover, the Inca's story is a powerful example of resilience and adaptation. Despite the catastrophic upheaval brought on by the Spanish conquest, the Inca people found ways to survive and adapt, demonstrating a tenacity that has echoed through the centuries. Their legacy lives on in the descendants who continue to inhabit the Andes, speaking Quechua and celebrating traditions that have been passed down through generations. In the end, the Inca Empire may have fallen, but its story is far from over. It's a tale of ambition and innovation, of power and its pitfalls, and ultimately of a people who refuse to be erased by the tides of history. The Inca social system, with all its complexities and contradictions, offers a window into human nature, the drive to build, to believe, and to endure against all odds. So next time you're sipping on a quinoa smoothie or marveling at Machu Picchu, spare a thought for the empire that once ruled the Andes. The Inca may have been conquered, but their spirit remains, a testament to the enduring power of culture and the resilience of the human spirit. And if there's one thing history has taught us, it's that the echoes of the past are never truly silent. They continue to shape our world in ways we might never have imagined. Your eyelids snap open to the brisk jab of an elbow, courtesy of your bunkmate. Welcome to the Agoge, Sparta's infamous boot camp, where the morning greeting is as warm as a bucket of ice water. Forget about hitting snooze. Here in Sparta, you're up before the sun, because when you're training to be a soldier from age 7, dawn's too late to start sharpening those survival instincts. By now, you might be wondering why you're enduring this Spartan start to your day. Let's rewind a couple of centuries to understand the madness behind the method. Meet Lycurgus, the legendary lawmaker of Sparta. He's like the ancient world's equivalent of a strict gym coach, but with a penchant for political reform. He laid down the laws that turned Sparta from a small-time city-state into a military powerhouse. According to the tales, granted, part myth, part reality, Lycurgus established the Agoge to churn out warriors as tough as nails and twice as sharp. This wasn't about getting an A in algebra or perfecting your cursive handwriting. The Agoge was a relentless grind designed to produce elite soldiers, not scholars. You see, in the grand Spartan scheme of things, hitting the books took a backseat to breaking bones, preferably your enemies. The ultimate goal, to create a society where every citizen was a cog in the military machine. Nothing like a little state-sanctioned indoctrination to start your day right. The political landscape of Sparta back then was a unique beast. It was basically a dual monarchy, supported by a council of elders and a democratic assembly of sorts. But let's be clear, this wasn't democracy as we know it. Think of it more as a tightly controlled oligarchy with a veneer of popular vote. Agoge fit perfectly into this system, ensuring everyone was on the same martial page and ready to defend Sparta's interests at the drop of a helmet. So, what did Lycurgus allegedly do to cement his legacy? He crafted a constitution called the Great Retra. It sounds like something out of a dystopian novel, but it was more of a set of directives to mold Spartan identity. And at the heart of this identity was the Agoge. It wasn't just about training warriors. It was about instilling the values of discipline, endurance, and communal loyalty. The idea was to create a city-state where every citizen was ready to sacrifice personal glory for the greater good. Sure, it sounds noble, but it was also a bit like signing a lifelong contract with the world's strictest personal trainer, minus the health benefits. Now, back to your morning routine. Breakfast isn't exactly a feast. Today's menu features a thin gruel that makes oatmeal look like a luxury. Forget about bacon and eggs. This is all about survival, remember. The Agoge diet was designed to keep you lean and mean, not fat and happy. The idea was to leave you just hungry enough to keep you on your toes, but not so starved that you couldn't lift a spear. As you choke down this Spartan delicacy, you might wonder how anyone thought this was a good idea. The answer lies in Sparta's geography and its frequent conflicts with neighboring city-states. Located in the heart of the Peloponnese, Sparta was surrounded by potential enemies. The Agoge was Sparta's insurance policy, ensuring every citizen could defend the homeland at a moment's notice. It was like living in a constant state of DEFCON 1, where even breakfast was a strategic maneuver. To add a bit more spice to your morning, let's talk about the social context. Spartans were a bit obsessed with the idea of the perfect citizen. This wasn't just about physical prowess, but also about moral integrity and unwavering loyalty. The Agoge was the crucible where these ideals were tested. Young boys were stripped of familial ties and molded into a collective fighting force. It was less about individual achievement and more about contributing to the team's success. So, no pressure or anything. Lest we get too romantic about the whole warrior ethos, let's debunk a few myths. The Agoge wasn't all about valiant deeds and glory on the battlefield. It was also about control. By indoctrinating boys from such a young age, the Spartan state ensured loyalty and minimized dissent. It was a clever, if ruthless, strategy to maintain social order. In a place where even breakfast was an exercise in discipline, there was little room for rebellion. As the sun climbs higher, you head out for a day of rigorous training. The Agoge wasn't just about building muscle. It was about honing every aspect of a warrior's life. Physical exercises were interspersed with lessons on survival tactics, stealth, and cunning. You were expected to learn by doing, often through harsh lessons that left little room for error. If you messed up, your punishment was swift and often painful. It was a tough school with tougher teachers, where success was measured in scars, not grades. The bigger picture here is clear. The Agoge was a finely tuned instrument of the Spartan state, designed to produce soldiers capable of maintaining its military dominance. It was about survival, both for the individual and for the society as a whole. By embedding these values into every citizen, Sparta ensured that its military machine ran smoothly for centuries. As your first day in the Agoge wears on, it becomes clear that this is more than a training camp. It's a social engineering experiment that shaped the very fabric of Spartan society. The Agoge was a testament to Spartan priorities, where the needs of the state outweighed personal comfort or achievement. It's a tough pill to swallow, but then again, so is the gruel. As the day winds down and you prepare for another Spartan night, you can't help but reflect on the sheer audacity of it all. The Agoge was a bold experiment, a relentless pursuit of an ideal that few other societies dared to emulate. It was a system that demanded everything and offered little in return. And yet, for the Spartans, it was worth the cost. In a world where survival was the ultimate currency, the Agoge was their investment in the future. Rest up. This is just the beginning. Tomorrow promises more of the same Spartan rigor, with a side of historical intrigue. As the day winds down and you prepare for another Spartan night, you can't help but reflect on the sheer audacity of it all. The Agoge was a bold experiment, a relentless pursuit of an ideal that few other societies dared to emulate. It was a system that demanded everything and offered little in return. And yet, for the Spartans, it was worth the cost. In a world where survival was the ultimate currency, The Agoge was their investment in the future. Rest up. This is just the beginning. Tomorrow promises more of the same Spartan rigor, with a side of historical intrigue. Your eyelids barely flutter shut before the next day kicks off with the kind of morning workout that makes CrossFit look like child's play. Welcome to Spartan morning drills, where the motto seems to be, if it doesn't hurt, you're not doing it right. Forget the idea of a gentle jog or a few leisurely laps around a track. In the Agoge, morning drills are all about pushing your body to the brink, and then a little further, just to see what happens. You start with a series of brutal calisthenics, push-ups, sit-ups, and squats until your muscles scream for mercy. But mercy isn't on the agenda. This is about forging endurance and resilience, what we might call Plutarchian endurance after the Greek historian Plutarch. He wrote extensively on Spartan customs, and while he might have romanticized a bit, who doesn't love a good Spartan story? His accounts of endurance training weren't far off the mark. Now, let's talk numbers. Mortality rates in the Agoge were not for the faint of heart. Historians estimate that as many as 50% of the boys didn't make it through the entire program. Whether they succumbed to the physical strain, illness, or the occasional training accident, the Agoge was a place where only the fittest survived. This wasn't just P.E. class. This was a survival course, with stakes as high as the Tagetes Mountains surrounding Sparta. Next up, it's time for some good old-fashioned wrestling. But forget the choreographed moves of professional wrestling or even the Olympic-style bouts. Spartan wrestling was a no-holds-barred, anything-goes brawl. It wasn't just about pinning your opponent. It was about developing the tenacity and grit required to take a hit and keep moving. If you ever wondered where the kick them while they're down philosophy came from, look no further. And just when you think you've gotten a handle on the morning routine, in comes the running. Distance running wasn't just an exercise. It was a test of endurance, speed, and mental fortitude. Imagine running barefoot over rocky terrain, your feet pounding against the earth as your lungs burn with each breath. The average Spartan boy would cover several miles a day, transforming into a lean, mean fighting machine. But why all this emphasis on physical toughness, you ask? Simple. It was all about preparing for war. Sparta was notorious for its military prowess, and the Agoge was the crucible in which future warriors were forged. The Greek historian Xenophon, who had a bit of a Spartan fanboy streak, marveled at their ability to endure hardships that would break lesser men. For Spartans, the battlefield was the ultimate proving ground, and every grueling drill was a step towards that moment of glory or doom. Beyond physical strength, the training also focused on stealth and cunning. Spartans believed in outsmarting as well as outmuscling their enemies. Young trainees were taught to move silently and strike without warning. It was like a real-life game of hide and seek, only the stakes were much higher. Get caught, and you'd face a thrashing that would teach you to never slip up again. These drills weren't just random acts of cruelty. They were carefully crafted to mold boys into the embodiment of Spartan ideals. The society valued strength, courage, and cunning above all, and the Agoge was the ultimate factory line producing these traits. But let's not sugarcoat it. This was state-sponsored brutality dressed up as character building. The harsh reality was that the Spartan state needed an army ready to defend its interests at any moment, and the Agoge was its insurance policy. And speaking of insurance, let's dig into the economic backdrop of these rigorous routines. You see, Sparta wasn't the wealthiest city-state. Their currency was famously iron bars, hardly the stuff of lavish lifestyles. But in a land where luxury was scorned and simplicity was celebrated, the wealth of Sparta lay in its human capital. The Agoge was a means of investing in this capital, ensuring that every citizen was worth his weight in iron. But here's the kicker. Despite the ruthless efficiency of this system, there was a dark underbelly. The emphasis on military might came at the cost of cultural and intellectual pursuits. While Athens was busy producing philosophers and playwrights, Sparta was churning out warriors. It's no wonder that the phrase Spartan lifestyle has become synonymous with austerity and discipline. As you slog through the morning drills, you might start wondering if there's a method to this madness. Why did the Spartans put their youth through this grueling regimen? The answer lies in their worldview. They believed that hardship bred strength, and that only through suffering could one achieve true greatness. It was a philosophy born out of necessity, given Sparta's precarious geopolitical position. Surrounded by rival city-states, They couldn't afford to be anything less than the best. Let's not forget the social context. This wasn't just about building a military machine. It was about maintaining control. By indoctrinating boys from such a young age, the Spartan state ensured loyalty and minimized dissent. This was about unity and conformity, ensuring that every citizen was on the same page, or at least on the same battlefield. As the sun climbs higher, your morning drills come to an end, leaving you drenched in sweat and gasping for breath. But there's no time to rest. The day marches on, bringing with it new challenges and lessons in Spartan endurance. The Agoge was a marathon, not a sprint, and only those with the stamina to keep up would survive. So, as you catch your breath and prepare for the next phase of this relentless boot camp, remember this. The Agoge wasn't just about building muscles. It was about shaping minds and spirits. It was a brutal yet effective method of ensuring that every Spartan was ready to lay down his life for his city-state. And while the romantic image of the noble Spartan warrior continues to captivate us, the reality was far grimmer and far more compelling. With your muscles aching and your mind reeling from the morning's trials, you begin to understand the price of Spartan citizenship. It was an all-consuming commitment to a way of life that demanded everything and left little room for weakness. But hey, at least you've got the afternoon to look forward to, because if Spartan mornings are this intense, who knows what the rest of the day will bring. And just as you've regained a smidgen of energy, the afternoon bell tolls, not for rest, but for a crash course in Spartan communication skills. This isn't about learning to craft eloquent speeches or mastering the art of small talk. Nope, it's about being laconic, a term that's basically shorthand for Spartan brevity. Spartans were masters of saying the most with the least. Think of it as Twitter, but with swords. You see, Spartans believed that words should be as sharp and to the point as their spears. Take, for example, the legendary exchange between Philip Roman II of Macedon and the Spartans. Philip, father of Alexander the Great, no pressure, Alex, sent a message to Sparta saying, "If I invade Laconia, I will destroy everything." The Spartans replied with a single word. If. Ouch, that's a mic drop moment before microphones were even a thing. This skill wasn't just a fun party trick, it was a survival tactic. Spartans were conditioned to communicate efficiently because in the chaos of battle, verbosity could be as deadly as an enemy's blade. A succinct order could save lives, while a rambling speech could mean disaster. It's like the ultimate game of charades, where losing isn't just embarrassing, it's potentially lethal. Now, while you're busy honing your verbal cutting edge, let's take a detour into the economic side of things. Why did the Spartan state pour so much into creating these warriors? It all comes down to their reliance on helots and the need to keep them in check. Helots were the serfs of Spartan society, essentially an enslaved population. They were the ones toiling in the fields, producing the food and resources that allowed Spartans to focus on their military exploits. Talk about an economic pyramid scheme with the helots at the bottom, shouldering the weight of Spartan supremacy. The economics of this setup were as brutal as they were efficient. Helots outnumbered Spartans by an estimated ratio of 7-1, which meant the Spartans lived in perpetual fear of revolt. To maintain control, they relied on the controversial Cryptae, an annual event where young Spartans were secretly sent to spy on, and if necessary, eliminate potentially rebellious helots. It was state-sponsored espionage and assassination rolled into one. Dark, absolutely. Effective, unfortunately, yes. This oppressive system was the backbone of Spartan economy and society. Without the helots, the Spartan military machine would grind to a halt. It's the grim reality behind their military might. The Spartans' freedom to train and fight was built on the backs of the oppressed, not exactly the kind of inspirational story you'd put on a motivational poster. Back to your Spartan communication drill, it's more than just about saying less. It's about saying it with authority and confidence. Spartans trained to ensure that their words carried weight, even if it was just a single syllable. This wasn't just about being succinct. It was about being unflinching in the face of adversity. Consider Leonidas's famous retort at Thermopylae. When told to surrender their weapons, he responded, "Come and take them." Talk about a spine of steel wrapped in a cloak of brevity. This laconic wit was a reflection of Spartan values, direct, no-nonsense, and unyielding. It's the verbal equivalent of their military tactics, straightforward and effective. But let's not romanticize it too much. This wasn't a society that encouraged open dialogue or philosophical debates. It was about control, and the less you said, the less chance there was to dissent. As the sun dips lower, painting the Spartan landscape in hues of gold, you start to grasp the layers of this society. The Agoge isn't just a training camp, it's a microcosm of Spartan ideology. Every drill, every lesson in laconic wit, every economic decision feeds into the larger narrative of control, efficiency, and survival. The myth of the noble Spartan warrior is seductive, but beneath the surface lies a story of coercion and calculated brutality. In this world, every word, every action is a piece of the grand puzzle that is Spartan society. The state's investment in its warriors was a strategic move to maintain dominance and safeguard against internal collapse. It's a balancing act between power and oppression, between the legend and the stark reality. So, as you wrap up your lesson in Spartan wit, remember, the Agoge wasn't just about making warriors. It was about sculpting a society where every citizen was both a sword and a shield for the state. It's a harsh truth wrapped in the romantic allure of Spartan legend, and as you head into the evening, you can't help but wonder what tomorrow's lessons will reveal. Stay tuned, because the Spartan saga is far from over. As the Spartan sun dips below the horizon, casting long shadows across the training grounds, you're thrust into yet another trial that would make even the most hardened survivalists squirm with envy. Tonight, the Agoge's version of a sleepover doesn't involve marshmallows or ghost stories. Nope, it's all about testing your resourcefulness in the kind of practical exam that involves more cunning than cramming. Welcome to the evening escapade where you're left to fend for yourself, complete with a side of societal scrutiny to keep you on your toes. This isn't just an exercise in roughing it. It's a carefully crafted test to see if you've absorbed the Spartan ethos of self-sufficiency. The Spartans had a knack for turning everyday challenges into life-or-death scenarios, and this, my friend, is no exception. You're expected to forage for food, find shelter, and evade detection, all while maintaining the stoic composure of a marble statue. Think of it as Survivor, ancient Greece, but with fewer camera crews and more existential stakes. But why such an emphasis on resourcefulness, you ask? It's all part of the Spartan master plan to ensure that every citizen could hold their own in a pinch. The Agoge wasn't just about creating mindless soldiers. It was about cultivating warriors who could think on their feet. After all, in a region as geopolitically volatile as ancient Greece, the ability to adapt was just as crucial as the ability to fight. Now, let's take a step back and consider the societal impact of this rigorous training. The Agoge wasn't just a boot camp. It was a rite of passage that defined Spartan citizenship. Completing the program was a prerequisite for attaining full rights within the Spartan polity. Fail, and you'd find yourself relegated to the status of a trembler, disenfranchised and ostracized from the very society you were meant to protect. It's a bit like being benched for the big game, but with lasting social consequences that impacted your entire life. The stakes were high, and the pressure to conform was relentless. Spartan society was a well-oiled machine, and the Agoge was the assembly line churning out its most crucial components, the hoplite soldiers. These foot soldiers formed the backbone of the Spartan army, known for their phalanx formation, a human tank of shields and spears that steamrolled through enemy lines with ruthless efficiency. In a world where every man was expected to be a warrior, the Agoge was the crucible that separated the warriors from the wannabes. Beyond the battlefield, the Agoge's influence extended into Spartan governance. Sparta's political system was an oligarchy masked with the trappings of dual kingship and a council of elders. The Agoge ensured that those who ascended to positions of power were thoroughly indoctrinated in Spartan values. It was a closed loop of power, where the state's interests were safeguarded by citizens molded in its image. This wasn't democracy as we know it. It was a carefully controlled hierarchy where dissent was about as welcome as a snowstorm in July. And speaking of control, let's not gloss over the economic underpinnings that made all this possible. Spartan society relied heavily on the labor of helots, and the Agoge's emphasis on resourcefulness served a dual purpose. It wasn't just about survival skills. It was about ensuring that Spartan citizens could maintain dominance over a servile class that vastly outnumbered them. This delicate balance of power rested on a knife's edge, and the Agoge was the whetstone keeping that edge razor-sharp. But the Spartan myth wasn't just confined to their borders. Their reputation for military prowess and stoic discipline earned them both admiration and animosity from other Greek states. The Battle of Thermopylae, where 300 Spartans made their legendary last stand, has been romanticized for centuries. But beneath the legend lies the harsh reality. It was a strategic delay, a sacrificial move to buy time for the Greek alliance against the Persian juggernaut. The Spartans were revered and feared in equal measure, their very name synonymous with unyielding strength and resilience. Yet, the Spartan way wasn't without its critics. Other Greek states, particularly Athens, viewed Spartan society as overly rigid and culturally barren. While Athens was busy birthing democracy and nurturing the arts, Sparta was laser-focused on its military machine. It was a tale of two city-states, each embodying different ideals of what it meant to be Greek. The contrast was stark, and the rivalry palpable, with each city-state believing in the superiority of its way of life. As you navigate the twilight test of cunning, the broader implications of the Agoge come into sharp relief. This wasn't just about individual prowess. It was about maintaining a societal order that prioritized collective strength over personal ambition. The Spartans had perfected the art of creating cohesion through conformity, a strategy that kept their society intact even as it stifled individual expression. And therein lies the duality of the Spartan legacy. On one hand, it's a story of unparalleled military achievement and societal cohesion. On the other, it's a cautionary tale of what happens when a society values might over mind, leaving little room for the cultural and intellectual pursuits that enrich human experience. Yet, even within this ironclad system, moments of cunning and ingenuity shine through. Take the Crypteia, for instance, a secretive rite where young Spartans honed their stealth skills by patrolling the countryside, keeping a watchful eye on the Helot population. It was a test of both stealth and survival, a real-world application of the lessons learned in the Agoge. The Spartans understood the value of adaptability, and these exercises were as much about enforcing control as they were about preparing for the unexpected. As the night deepens, you begin to see the Spartan system for what it really is, a complex interplay of power, control, and survival. The Agoge was more than just a training ground. It was the crucible in which Spartan identity was forged, and the stage upon which their societal dramas played out. It's a world where every decision is a calculated move in a high-stakes game of chess, with the future of Sparta as the ultimate prize. So, as you face the challenges of the night, remember, the Agoge wasn't just about building warriors. It was about crafting a society that could withstand the test of time. In the Spartan worldview, every citizen was a piece of the whole, and the Agoge was the glue that held it all together. But as history would later reveal, even the strongest systems have their Achilles heel, and Sparta's was yet to be exposed. Stay tuned, because the Spartan saga continues, with more lessons and legends waiting to unfold. And there you are, standing in the twilight of your first day in the Agoge, the Spartan boot camp that makes modern-day military training look like a casual jog through a park. As the stars twinkle above the Spartan landscape, you're left to ponder the myth versus reality of this ancient society that so fiercely captured the imagination of generations. The truth is, while the stories of Spartan glory might sound like a page torn from an epic saga, the reality was more like a gritty documentary on survival and control. Let's start by dismantling the myth that Spartans were the superhero warriors of the ancient world. Sure, they were formidable, but less in the Caped Crusader way and more in the "we've got nothing else to do but fight" kind of way. Think about it. In a society where everything revolved around military prowess, from your morning gruel to your bedtime stories, you'd either become a warrior or, well, not make it at all. The Agoge was the ultimate test, a ruthless filter that only the strongest survived. With mortality rates in the Agoge estimated to reach as high as 50%, this was less about glory and more about a brutal process of elimination. But why did Sparta go all in on this militaristic lifestyle? It wasn't just about being tough guys on the playground of ancient Greece. Economic and political survival was at the heart of it. When you're a city-state surrounded by potential enemies and restless serfs, hello, Helots, you don't just want a strong army, you need it like a fish needs water. The Spartan economy wasn't built on wealth, it was built on control. Helots, who outnumbered Spartans by a daunting margin, were the backbone of this system, providing the agricultural output that let Spartans focus on their military endeavors. Without them, the Spartan way of life would crumble like a poorly baked baklava. Now, let's talk about the legend of Leonidas and his band of 300 at Thermopylae, a tale so legendary it earned a Hollywood makeover. The truth is, while the stand was heroic, it was also a strategic move designed to delay the Persian advance and buy time for the rest of Greece to mobilize. The Spartans knew they were marching to their deaths, but they also understood the power of a legacy. That's the thing about legends. They're often built on sacrifice and necessity, not just heroics. Fast forward to today, and the romanticized image of Sparta as a utopia of martial perfection persists. But let's face it, the reality was a harsh cocktail of discipline, deprivation, and indoctrination. Sparta's focus on military excellence came at a cost, a society that was culturally stagnant compared to the intellectual vibrancy of Athens. While Athenians were busy inventing democracy and philosophy, Spartans were perfecting the art of war. It's like comparing a bustling city teeming with creativity to a fortress where everything is geared towards survival. Sure, the fortress is impressive, but it's not exactly a breeding ground for art and innovation. And that brings us to the Agoge's legacy in terms of human endurance and societal structures. It tells us a lot about the lengths to which a society will go when it's built on a foundation of fear and necessity. The Agoge was an extreme response to extreme circumstances, a society so focused on survival that it sacrificed individualism at the altar of collective security. It's a stark reminder of how fragile the balance between freedom and security can be, and how easily the scales can tip when survival is at stake. Yet, there's a certain allure to the Spartan myth, isn't there? The idea of a society where everyone is united in purpose, where personal sacrifice is seen as the highest virtue. It's a narrative that resonates with our innate desire for order and heroism. But here's the rub. While the myth is seductive, the reality is sobering. The Agoge wasn't just about building warriors. It was about maintaining a rigid social order through discipline and control. It was a society that prioritized conformity over creativity, where dissent was as unwelcome as a Persian invasion. So, as you wrap up your reflections on this first day in the Agoge, what does it all mean? It means that the legend of Sparta is as much about what we want to believe as it is about what actually happened. It's a tale of human endurance, yes, but also of the lengths to which a society will go to enforce its ideals. The Agoge was a microcosm of Spartan society, a place where the line between myth and reality was as blurred as the night sky above you. In the end, the legacy of the Agoge is a testament to human resilience and the complexities of societal structures. It's a story of survival against the odds, of a society that chose to forge its identity through the crucible of warfare. It's a stark reminder that while legends are born in the fires of history, they're often tempered by the cold, hard truths of reality. So, as you drift off to sleep, remember, the story of Sparta is not just a tale of heroes and battles, but a reflection of the enduring struggle between myth and reality, between the allure of legend and the harshness of truth. And that, my friend, is a story worth telling. The kingdom of Kush, the ancient civilization that proves under the radar, isn't always code for irrelevant. While everyone was busy making Egypt the prom queen of ancient history, Kush was quietly getting its act together around 1070 BCE. Right out of the gate, Kush was like the indie band that eventually steals the spotlight from the big-name headliner. Nestled in the Nubian desert, south of Egypt, the kingdom found itself sitting on a treasure trove of gold and ivory, which it used to fuel its rise to power. Talk about a literal gold mine. Now, let's talk geography first, because location is everything, right? Kush had a prime spot along the Nile River, which was the ancient world's version of a superhighway. Being close to the river meant water for agriculture and an express lane for trade. But unlike Egypt, which had its cozy floodplains, Kush was more about rocky terrains and savannas. This less than hospitable environment nudged Kushites to become masters of resource management long before it was cool. They harnessed the Nile not just for survival, but as a freeway to export their golden goodies north and south. Speaking of gold, Kush wasn't just dabbling in the stuff, it was swimming in it. The kingdom's gold mines were legendary, and by legendary, I mean they made King Tut's treasures look like pocket change. Egyptian records even refer to Kush as the land of gold. And let's be real, when the Egyptians, those hoarders of bling, call you the land of gold, you've hit the jackpot. This wealth allowed Kush to develop a complex economy that was less about pyramid schemes and more about actual pyramids. Though smaller, they were similarly pointy and impressive. Kush also boasted a wealth of ivory, which back then was basically the ancient version of Bitcoin. The Kushites knew that elephants were more than just big grey lawn ornaments. They were walking treasure chests. Using ivory, they carved out a niche for themselves in trade networks that stretched across Africa and into the Middle East. They didn't just stop at fancy tusks either. They had the audacity to domesticate these colossal creatures, turning them into the ancient world's version of a battle tank. So while Egypt was busy chiseling its history into stone, Kush was out there, quite literally, riding elephants into the annals of history. Politically, Kush was no slouch either. The kingdom developed a centralized state with a king who wielded considerable power. You didn't get to sit on the throne of Kush by being a pushover. These kings weren't just figureheads. They played a crucial role in maintaining the kingdom's economic and military might. And here's the kicker. As Egypt's power waned, Kushite rulers decided it was time to flip the script and take a crack at ruling Egypt themselves. By the 8th century BCE, the Kushite king Pi marched north and declared himself pharaoh, uniting both kingdoms under his rule. It's like the underdog story of ancient history, but with more elephants. Now, let's address the elephant in the room. No, not the literal ones. I'm talking about the myth that Egypt was the only game in town. Sure, Egypt had the flashy pyramids and the mummy hype, but Kush had a resilience and resourcefulness that made it a formidable player in its own right. Kushite society was rich in culture, with a unique script called Meroitic that remains mostly undeciphered, adding an air of mystery to their legacy. They also had their own spin on architecture, art, and religion, blending indigenous practices with Egyptian influences to create something uniquely Kushite. So, while the ancient world was busy gawking at Egypt's grandeur, Kush was quietly building an empire that would challenge its mighty neighbor. This wasn't just a tale of gold and elephants. It was a story of strategic brilliance and cultural fusion that created a dynasty stretching over 1,000 years. In the grand tapestry of history, Kush is that intriguing subplot that finally gets its moment in the spotlight. Stick around as we uncover more about how this seemingly overlooked kingdom carved out a legacy that rivaled even the most celebrated civilizations of its time. And so, as Kush marched north with the gusto of an upstart tech startup eyeing a corporate giant, the stage was set for one of the most fascinating power plays in ancient history. Picture King Pi, the Kushite ruler with a penchant for elephants and ambition, striding into Egypt like he owned the place, because, well, soon enough he would. Around 728 BCE, Pi led his army into Egypt, a move that seemed as audacious as it was unexpected. The reason? Egypt was a mess. Think of it as a once glorious empire now suffering from a bad case of midlife crisis, with regional rulers squabbling like siblings over the last slice of cake. Pi saw an opportunity where others saw chaos. With a strategic mind and a military savvy that would make any chess grandmaster proud, he seized control of Upper Egypt. But hold on, this wasn't just a hostile takeover. It was more of a friendly merger with benefits. Pi wasn't interested in ravaging cities and leaving chaos in his wake. Instead, he issued a decree known as the Victory Stella that trumpeted his military prowess, while also emphasizing his role as a restorer of order and piety. It was a masterpiece of ancient PR spin, painting him not as a conqueror, but as a savior of Egyptian tradition. Talk about savvy branding. In a stroke of strategic genius, Pi respected the Egyptian religion and culture, which was akin to wearing the right team's jersey at a home game. He allowed local rulers to retain their positions as long as they acknowledged his supremacy. In essence, he kept the peace by giving Egypt what it craved: stability and continuity. It was like hitting the reset button on a glitchy computer. Suddenly, everything just worked better. Now, let's talk about the 25th dynasty, the reign of the Kushite pharaohs over Egypt, which lasted about a century from approximately 747 to 656 BCE. This dynasty was like a greatest hits album of Kushite rule, featuring not only King Pi, but also his successors like Shabaka, Shebitku, and Taharqa, each bringing their own flair to the mix. They ruled from Thebes, the spiritual heart of Egypt, and worked tirelessly to blend Kushite and Egyptian elements into a cohesive, if complex, tapestry. While the Kushites were in charge, Egypt entered a renaissance of sorts. Temples were rebuilt, art flourished, and the economy was revitalized. The Kushites cleverly managed Egypt's economic resources, which was no small feat considering the fiscal chaos they inherited. They tapped into Egypt's agricultural potential and mining operations, while simultaneously leveraging Kush's own wealth in gold and ivory. The result was a cross-cultural exchange that was as rich as it was profitable. But the Kushite rulers weren't just about playing nice. They were realists, and they knew that maintaining control required more than just cultural sensitivity. It was a constant game of balancing power between the northern and southern parts of their realm. The Egyptians were notorious for their regionalism, and keeping everyone on the same page was like herding cats. To manage this, the Kushite pharaohs positioned themselves as the great mediators, the ultimate arbiters of all things Nile-related. Of course, not everyone was thrilled about this new order. The Assyrians, those formidable power brokers of the ancient Near East, were eyeing Egypt like a cat eyes a particularly juicy bird. They saw the Kushite presence as a threat to their own ambitions in the region. This led to a series of confrontations that tested the mettle of Kushite rulers. It was a classic case of international politics, ancient style, complete with alliances, betrayals, and the ever-present threat of war. Taharqa, one of the most famous of the Kushite pharaohs, found himself in the thick of these geopolitical struggles. His reign, which lasted from 690 to 664 BCE, was marked by a mix of victories and setbacks. He initially held his own against the Assyrians, even scoring some notable wins. But as anyone in politics will tell you, nothing lasts forever. By the end of his reign, the Assyrians had the upper hand, and Taharqa was forced to retreat back to Nubia, leaving Egypt to its fate. So, was the Kushite rule over Egypt a glorious chapter of mutual enrichment and cultural flourishing, or was it just another example of the harsh realities of imperial politics? The truth, as always, is somewhere in between. The Kushites brought innovation and revitalization to Egypt, but they also faced the unrelenting challenges of governing a complex and often fractious society. It's a tale as old as time. Ambitious leaders trying to maintain power while navigating the slippery slope of diplomacy, conflict, and cultural exchange. But let's not get too caught up in the romantic myth of Kushite Egypt as a harmonious utopia. The reality was far more complex, with economic pressures and political rivalries simmering beneath the surface. Yet, this period in history serves as a testament to the resilience and adaptability of both Kushite and Egyptian cultures. They managed to create something truly unique, a blend of traditions that left an indelible mark on the ancient world. As we look ahead, there's more to uncover about the legacy of the Kushite dynasty and how their influence echoed through the ages. From the rise and fall of their empire to the enduring cultural impacts, the story of Kush is a rich tapestry woven with threads of ambition, resilience, and innovation. Stay tuned as we continue to unravel this fascinating saga, where history meets human nature in all its glory and complexity. And so, as we continue our journey through the annals of Kushite history, let's take a detour into the realm of cultural and technological innovation. If you've ever thought that the ancient world was all about pyramids and papyrus, think again. The Kushites were the ultimate trendsetters of their time, with a flair for architecture and language that was as distinctive as their ambition. Let's start with those pyramids. Yes, the ones that make you wonder if they came with some assembly required warning. While Egypt was busy writing its own version of how to build a pyramid for dummies, the Kushites were quietly outdoing their northern neighbors with a twist on the classic design. Located in Merare, the pyramids of Kush are smaller and steeper, like the ancient equivalent of an edgy skyscraper. Over 200 of these architectural marvels dart the landscape, a testament to the Kushite penchant for innovation. And here's the kicker. While Egypt was rambling on about its architectural prowess, the Kushites were perfecting the art of funerary architecture, ensuring that even in death they stood tall, literally. The irony here is delicious. While Egypt's pyramids are probably the most Instagrammable structures of the ancient world, The Kushites managed to create their own iconic version, while Egypt was preoccupied with chiseling its legacy into stone. It's like the difference between a grand opera and a tight, impactful rock ballad, both memorable, but in vastly different ways. Speaking of memorable, let's not overlook the Meroitic script, a linguistic puzzle that has kept scholars scratching their heads for centuries. Imagine inventing a script that's both fascinating and frustratingly elusive. That's Meroitic for you. This script, used from around 300 BCE to 400 CE, is still largely undeciphered, and if that doesn't scream mystery, I don't know what does. Picture an ancient culture leaving behind a diary that no one can quite read. The script was used for religious texts and royal decrees, and its indecipherability only adds to the Kushite allure. It's as if the Kushites wrote the ultimate, you had to be there story, leaving the rest of us to piece together the narrative without a Rosetta Stone to guide us. Now, let's dive into the social hierarchies and religious structures of Kushite society. Much like any ancient civilization worth its salt, Kush had a social setup that would make a modern corporate ladder look like child's play. At the top, of course, was the king, but here's the twist. Women in Kushite society wielded significant power too. The Kandake, or Queen Mother, was no mere figurehead. These women played crucial roles in politics, religion, and even warfare. Some historians suggest the Kandake might have been a co-ruler, proving that the Kushites were way ahead of the curve when it came to gender equality. So, while neighboring societies were busy relegating women to the sidelines, Kush was having none of it. Religion in Kush was a fascinating blend of Egyptian influences and indigenous practices. The gods and goddesses of Kush were often depicted in art that rivaled that of their Egyptian counterparts, albeit with a Kushite twist. Temples in Kush were not just places of worship, but vibrant centers of cultural life. The great Temple of Ammon at Jebel Barkal, for instance, was a spiritual hub that reflected the kingdom's devotion and its connection to its Egyptian neighbors. Yet, the Kushites had their own pantheon, with deities like Apidamak, a lion-headed god that embodied the martial spirit of the Kushite people. This fusion of religious beliefs is a testament to the Kushite ability to adapt and integrate various cultural elements into a cohesive identity. Let's not forget the grandiose art and inscriptions that have left historians both awed and puzzled. Kushite art is rich in symbolism, with scenes depicting kings and queens in all their finery, often accompanied by guards who seem to have multi-generational loyalty programs. But how often did reality live up to the art's lofty claims? Well, like any good piece of PR, these depictions were often more aspirational than factual. The inscriptions tell tales of victories and divine favor, but the reality was likely a bit messier, with political intrigue and power struggles hidden beneath the surface. In the end, the Kushites were more than just Egypt's southern neighbors. They were innovators, cultural magpies, and masters of adaptation. They were the original underdogs who rose to prominence through a blend of shrewd strategy and cultural savvy. As we move forward in this tale, we'll explore more of how the innovations and influences of Kush echoed through the ages, leaving a legacy that's as enigmatic as the script they left behind. So, hang tight as we continue this wild ride through history, uncovering the layers of a civilization that was both a mystery and a marvel. So, as we wade deeper into the saga of Kush, it's time to confront the not-so-glamorous reality of its decline. A tale that could double as an ancient warning against ignoring the environment. Picture a kingdom that had once galloped into history on the back of elephants, now trudging through the sands of time as its fortunes slowly dwindled. By around 300 CE, the mighty Kush found itself caught in a perfect storm of environmental and economic woes that make today's climate debates look like polite disagreements over dinner. First, let's talk climate. The Kushites, like many ancient civilizations, were at the mercy of Mother Nature, and she can be a fickle friend. As the world cooled during the late antique Little Ice Age, Kush experienced a noticeable shift in climate. The once reliable Nile floods grew erratic. The savannas that had supported agriculture and livestock began to dry up. Imagine farming on land that's gradually turning into a scene from Dune. The irony. As the water levels dropped, so did the fortunes of Kush, an ancient civilization whose success was so closely tied to the whims of the Nile. Not to be outdone by climate, economic disruptions joined the party. Trade routes that had once been as bustling as the Silk Road started to falter. The rise of Axum, a rival kingdom in present-day Ethiopia, created a new competitor in the Red Sea trade network. Axum's strategic position allowed it to control key maritime routes, effectively giving Kush a run for its gold and ivory. Trade was no longer the golden goose it once was, leaving Kush with fewer coins in the treasury and more elephants than it knew what to do with. But wait, there's more. As if climate change and economic competition weren't enough, resource depletion reared its ugly head. The gold mines that had once fueled Kush's economy were becoming less productive, like a fruit tree that's been picked bare. It's the classic tale of overexploitation, a kingdom digging itself into a literal and metaphorical hole. And let's not forget the social implications. With resources drying up, tensions within the society likely simmered under the pressure of scarcity. Yet despite these grim realities, the myth of a noble decline still lingers. It's easy to romanticize Kush as a kingdom that faded gracefully into the annals of history, like an aging rock star who exits the stage before the final curtain call. But the truth is far messier. Just as with any society facing decline, there were probably internal struggles, power plays, and a fair amount of scrambling to keep things afloat. The romantic notion of a noble decline is just that, a notion, not the gritty reality of navigating a kingdom through stormy weather. As Kush's power waned, its cultural and religious centers, like Meroe, continued to serve as beacons of its once great civilization. But even these places couldn't escape the changing tides. The pyramids that had once stood as symbols of innovation now loomed as reminders of past greatness, a bit like finding a dusty trophy on the shelf, a relic of glory days gone by. In drawing lessons from the decline of Kush, modern parallels are hard to ignore. Economic competition, environmental shifts, and resource management are issues that could fill today's headlines. Kush's story serves as a cautionary tale, reminding us that ignoring these factors can spell disaster, regardless of how golden your kingdom once was. As we continue our journey through the sands of Kush, it's clear that the story of its decline is as instructive today as it was centuries ago. Yet, let's not wrap this up in a neat bow just yet. The decline of Kush wasn't the end of its influence, nor the end of our story. The cultural legacy of Kush, from its architectural marvels to its enigmatic script, continues to intrigue historians and adventurers alike. As we look forward to the next chapter, we'll delve into how Kush's legacy echoed through the ages, influencing the civilizations that followed. So grab your metaphorical adventure gear and stay tuned for more historical twists and turns as we unravel the next threads of this ancient tapestry. As we turn the final page of Kush's saga, let's dive into the legacy of this remarkable kingdom and why it's often left lurking in the shadows of ancient history. For a civilization that once flexed its golden muscles alongside Egypt, you'd expect Kush to have its own blockbuster movie by now. Instead, it remains more of an indie film with a cult following. So, why is Kush stuck in the historical footnotes while Egypt hogs the limelight like an ancient Brangelina? First, let's tackle the elephant in the room. Again, metaphorically, though actual elephants did play a starring role in Kushite history. For centuries, Egypt's grandiose monuments and mummified celebrities have stolen the spotlight. I mean, how do you compete with a civilization that left behind the largest stone structures on Earth? Yet, while the Great Pyramid might have the Instagram likes, Kush had something equally compelling. A culture of resilience and innovation that thrived in an unforgiving landscape. Kush's legacy is rich with stories that deserve a wider audience. Take the archaeological revelations that have emerged over the last century. For example, when European explorers stumbled upon the pyramids of Meroe in the early 19th century, they were baffled. These pyramids, numbering over 200, were smaller and steeper than their Egyptian counterparts, but equally awe-inspiring. It's like finding out your low-key neighbor has a collection of rare records that rival anything in the Billboard Top 100. Modern archaeology has slowly peeled back layers of sand and time, revealing the complexity of Kushite society. Excavations have unearthed temples, royal palaces, and even the remnants of bustling urban centers. This was no backwater kingdom. It was a cultural and economic powerhouse. Meroe, the capital of Kush during its golden age, was a city that would make any urban planner's heart skip a beat. With its iron-smelting workshops and thriving markets, it was the industrial hub of its day, cranking out metal goods that were the envy of the ancient world. But why has this narrative taken so long to come to the forefront? Partly, it's because history has a habit of being written by the victors, or, in this case, by those with the biggest monuments and loudest stories. When the Egyptian hieroglyphs were deciphered in the early 1800, Egyptology took off like a rocket, leaving Kushology eating its dust. The ancient Egyptian civilization was suddenly accessible, its stories and secrets ready for public consumption, while Kush remained an enigmatic whisper on the fringes. The rediscovery of Kush is not just about filling in the historical gaps, it's a reshaping of African historical narratives. For too long, Africa's history has been viewed through a narrow lens, often overshadowed by the stories of Europe and the Near East. Kush challenges this perspective, showing that Africa was not a passive player in the ancient world, but a dynamic center of culture and power. The kingdom's influence stretched across borders, impacting trade, religion, and politics in ways that are only now being fully appreciated. In recent decades, scholars have begun to rectify this oversight. The study of Kush is flourishing, with researchers diving into everything from its enigmatic Meroitic script to its role in the regional power dynamics of antiquity. These efforts are slowly bringing Kush out of the shadows and into the broader narrative of world history. It's a bit like discovering a forgotten chapter in a beloved book, one that adds depth and dimension to the entire story. So, what's the takeaway from Kush's enduring legacy? Perhaps it's a reminder that history is not a static tale of kings and queens, but a vibrant tapestry woven from the threads of countless cultures and civilizations. Kush's story is one of adaptability and innovation, of a society that thrived against the odds and left a lasting imprint on the world. As we wrap up our time-traveling adventure through the kingdom of Kush, let's reflect on why this ancient civilization deserves a brighter spotlight in the annals of history. It's time to give Kush its due, to celebrate its resilience and creativity, and to recognize that history's narrative is richer and more complex than the headlines might suggest. After all, every underdog has its day, and for Kush, that day is long overdue. So next time you're tempted to marvel at the grandeur of Egypt, spare a thought for Kush, the kingdom that proved you don't need to be the loudest to leave an indelible mark on history.